A mover and a seconder for the resumption of the meeting. Moved by Councillor Wilby, second by Councillor Morrison, that the Council of the Municipality of Huron East resumes the regular council meeting at 7:03 p.m. All those in favor? And motion carries. Thank you. Reporting out from our closed session, Council received an update in closed session regarding disposition of land in Brussels and another matter regarding personal information about identifiable individuals. And I actually, did I need a mover and a seconder for that portion? Sorry, it doesn't.
No, sorry, that's just your reporting out.
Okay, all right, thank you. So I've called the meeting to order, and our land acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge that the land we stand upon today is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Neutral Peoples. Can I get a mover and a seconder for the agenda, please? Moved by Councillor Chartrand, second by Councillor Deal, that the agenda for the regular meeting of council dated May 17th of 2022 be adopted as circulated. All those in favor? And motion carries. Thank you. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest this evening? And I do have one already noted, and Councillor Deal is likely to declare a pecuniary interest on item 14.1 as an applicant is a family member. Are there any others to declare at this time? Seeing none, thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting, a motion please. Mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor McClellan, second by Councillor Dalton, that the Council of the Municipality of Huron East approve the following council meeting minutes as printed and circulated. That's the regular meeting of May 3rd of 2022. Any comments or questions on those minutes? All those in favor? And motion, 1, 2, 3, 4. Motion carries. Thank you. Public meetings, hearings, and delegations. And the first one is a presentation by Paul Seaback and Company for the 2021 financial statements. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here. Good evening to everyone. Our report for tonight basically are two reports. One is the full audited financial statements, and the other one is a 2-page report called Report to Council. It shows a little more detail than your audited financial statements and a little bit 5-year history. That being said, the full audit statements are more condensed, but they're important because they're submitted to the province. And along with your FIR, the Financial Information Report, is a big part on how the province sees your municipality. I should compliment management that the statements are done earlier this year. That's always good. A lot of municipalities aren't meeting some of the time deadlines, and yours has, and the province has been impressed by them. As far as the audit, we did an interim audit in October for 3 days, and we were here for a week, March 3rd. We'd like to thank the finance and other departments that they allowed us to be on site. You can do audits remotely, but it's better to be on site. You get better communication, you have better access to records and review accounting systems, etc. So that was good. At the end of the day, the audit resulted in a clean auditor's report, which is found in formal financial statements. Before we go through some of the reports, just a few indicators and observations. When we look at the financial statements, they show a surplus of $2.5 million. Last year's was very similar. But it's important to say that we are required to produce financial statements with certain accounting policies set out by the province. When you look at the financial statements as prepared, you know how you would calculate your mill rate and your budget. You had a much smaller surplus of $9,252. The big reason there is when we do financial statements, we're required to set up your capital assets and amortize them. When you do your budget, you're raising enough funds to actually expense the capital projects. Another thing is when you do financial statements, you show reserves, transfers in and out as income and expenses. We just show that as an allocation of the final surplus. So we're confident we all start from the same financial records. We just use different accounting policies, but I just want to make it clear that if you look at the financial statements, it shows surplus of 2.6 million. And in reality, how you compared to what you started with a nil budget, zero budget, your surplus was $9,252. During the year, you spent almost $5 million on capital, the majority on transportation, water and sewer. You actually had budgeted to spend $8.1 million on capital, but there were some things delayed. The fire truck you didn't receive until this year. Some projects actually came in under budget, and you didn't complete all the water sewer projects in Brussels. At the end of the year, the municipality had loans of $952,000. Your main loan is last year you took out a loan for the Main Street construction. It's at $768,000. It's being paid over 10 years. As far as how the province sees your debt, obviously you don't have very much debt, so that's very, very good. They do calculate. You're allowed to have payments up to 25% of your revenue. So at 88,000, that's your payments. You're well below that, so that's good. At the end of the year, you had reserves and reserve funds, $12.4 million, very much the same as last year, up 54,000. There was to be lower, but you didn't complete some of the water sewer projects, so that money is still sitting in reserves. You also have $1.3 million of unspent federal gas tax, which you can use on projects this year. So that's kind of a summary. If we turn to the two-page report to council, the first page is basically your balance sheet. First thing you notice, your bank is up $1.8 million. You had $1.2 million in your general account, $572,000 in your board cemeteries account. Taxes receivables are lower. Just you did a better job collecting your taxes, which is good. You have more money in the bank, less outstanding. You'll notice the receivables, $3 million versus $2 million last year. The main thing there is you received, you have some outstanding money recoverable from the province for the connecting link project, $831,000. There's some municipal drain recoverable from the province, but when it's recoverable from the province, you're pretty sure you're going to get it. Your investments are a little lower. You took some funds out to pay for some capital projects. Long-term receivables, that started last year. That's money recoverable from the Egmontville sewer connections. So that's slowly being paid down. And then you have inventories and prepaids are up quite a bit. Of the $325,000 in inventory and prepaids, $266,000 is for the fire truck that was delivered in 2022. So current assets, total assets there are $15.2 million. Things you owed at the end of the year, accounts payable, pretty normal, $2.3 million. Deferred revenue, that's quite a bit lower. Last year, you had received some connecting link funding that was received before the project was completed. So that was in deferred revenue, and that was spent this year. So it's back to $32,000. Deferred revenue, reserve funds, the most of that is your gas tax I talked about. You had $1.3 million of unspent gas tax at the end of the year. And then you have municipal debt. We've talked about that. So total liabilities of $5 million. So your net financial assets, basically the funds you have to work with, $10,269,000. It's up $125,000 from last year. And if you look, it's come all the way up from 5 years ago, it was $8.2 million. So you're up $2 million over the last few years. So that's all positive. Capital assets, as I said, you've added around $5 million, and you depreciated 2.5. So if you take your total tangible assets, net financial assets, that's basically your surplus, $86 million. So that $73.7 million is the general surplus and investment capital assets. And we talked about the $12 million, $12.4 million set aside for reserves. The next page of that report to council is your 5-year comparison, your operating. Just pointing out any things that's different or other from budget. The investing in Canada infrastructure, that's lower. You didn't spend all the money on the bridge project, so you didn't get all, obviously you didn't get all the funding. The Safe Start funding, you received it in 2020, but you used it mostly last year, 333,000. The county funded daycare more last year. You see 460,000. 94 was for COVID funding, another was just to compensate for lower rates. Other things, water and sewer last year, water and sewer is 4.7 million in 2020. That's because you added in $1.9 million of sewer project connection. And so this year it's back to normal, just your water and sewer billings. So all the other things are pretty close to budget. So you come to total revenue, $17.6 million. Your expenditures, some are lower. Recreation expenditures be lower. You had some shutdowns because of COVID. We've talked about the daycare revenue being lower, or actually higher, because in 2020 the daycare was shut down quite a bit. So your expenditures are higher this year, roll back to normal. So total, when you go through everything, total expenditures, 15,662,000. So you come back to the surplus of 2,563,000. If we were to go through the financial statements, the things I might report on is the auditor's report. As I said, it's a clean audit report. There is a schedule. When you go to the notes, there's page 4 of the notes, municipal debt. It just shows the outstanding debt the municipality has at $952,000. The main one being the new loan, the street loan that was taken out in 2020. And further on in the financial statements, there's a schedule of your reserves, and it shows your opening reserves, 12,423,000 at the end of the year. Basically the same. You were able to do most of the projects without spending too much of your reserves, but I should note that the 12 million, $8.4 million is specific, mostly specific for water and sewer projects. And then deferred revenue, we've talked about that. Federal gas tax funds, $1.3 million outstanding. And then the last thing I would talk about on the financial statements, your trust funds. Third last page, there's a schedule. Basically your trust funds are your cemetery perpetuity funds, and then your 2 hydro trust funds, the one for Brussels and the one for Seafloor. And it shows all the various balances. They're all mostly up. So at the end of the year, your total trust funds were $3,270,000. Does anyone have any questions on the financial report?
Are there any questions from members of council at this time? The only one that comes up for me, Paul, is that when you're doing the audit, do you also check the municipality's accounting procedures that we have in place to safeguard our actual accounting network? Or is that kind of a separate audit that would be done?
No, we're required to review your internal controls. We don't do an audit on it. So in your situation, generally the procedures at the town hall are, they're all controlled and good as far as your payments collecting and all that. And then you also run 2 arenas, and we kind of go through theirs. Arenas have tightened up, past years. They have better bookings and things of that sort. We also run a master swimming pool. We review that, and then you also have a daycare center. So we basically do reviews of ask questions about controls, and we review them. We do some walkthroughs of them, and So that is a large part of it.
Okay. So, and based on that, I realize most of this report is meant to be the financial numbers. From your opinion, are you comfortable that we have appropriate controls in place, or are there any of the policies that should be updated or reviewed at this time?
No, when we go through everything, our report would say, are there any significant, things we would recommend? And at this point, there aren't. And that being said, anytime we've recommended anything to the county department, they've always, basically looked at them and taken steps to improve them. So at this point, no.
Okay, thank you very much. One last call. Any other questions from members of council? Seeing none, Paul, thank you very much for your presentation.
No, thanks very much. Have a good evening.
Can I get a mover and a seconder to receive the audited report, please? Moved by Councillor Morrison, second by Councillor Deal, that the Council of the Municipality of Huron East receive and accept the 2021 audited financial statements for the Municipality of Huron East and trust funds of the Municipality of Huron East as presented by CBAC and Company for information purposes. All those in favor? And motion carries. Thank you. Before we begin with the delegations this evening, I'd like to remind all observers and public participants of virtual meeting etiquette. We ask that microphones remain muted and videos are off until you are called upon to speak. The reason for the having the video off is we're trying to minimize the amount of bandwidth that is being used because we don't want anybody dropping off altogether. And we certainly want to be able to see all of our councillors from the rural area. We ask that all participants remain respectful of the public, staff, and council members. And if I feel that someone is being disrespectful, we will ask that you leave the meeting. And the first delegation that we have this evening is the delegation for the BMGCC Renovation Fundraising Group. Read the fundraising campaign progress and current project status. And I'm not sure who's taking over this portion of the meeting.
I think I'm going to go first, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Dan. Welcome.
Yeah, so thanks, Council, for allowing us to have part of your agenda here. I'm Dan Fritz. I think most of you probably know me. I'm pretty heavily involved with the BMGCC project there in Brussels. We won't take up very much of your time. We're certainly not here to argue with your CAO's recommendations or anything like that. There was a few on your council that thought it would be important to hear our perspective, as well as, the committee thought it'd be nice for our voice to be heard as well. So I've got with me here kind of the rest of our leadership team as well, in Brian Tempass, Roxanne Nicholson, Doug McCarter, John Van Vliet, and Nicole Utzi. So I don't think anyone on the call would, disagree that the tender results are disappointing. There's only one bid and it's over budget. I'd certainly love to sit here and fight the good fight and say that we need shovels in the ground tomorrow and we have to go with that one bid. But, we're spending tax dollars or we're spending community dollars. So I don't think we necessarily disagree with the recommendation if council so chooses to retender. We do want to get the point across, and maybe that's a little bit what we ran into this time around, is that if we do retender, it would be nice. I know there's timelines and you're going to get your lame duck here as well, but it would be nice to get that out as soon as possible as those timelines permit. It'd just be nice to hit those contractors that are going to be, bidding for spring 2023 here, before spring 2023, of course. So yeah, if that's your decision, I think we did just kind of want to convey that message. We also wanted to get across that, there is certainly still strong support for this project within the community. I think if you look further down your agenda and you see our fundraising results, you're going to see that we hit our minimum goal of $1.5 million in like 3.5 weeks. So, I trust that none of you don't think that's exceptional. We're pretty proud of that for sure. Yeah, and that kind of rolls into our next, I guess, request you'd call it, is just that, there is a plan in place for this fundraising and it seems to be working really well. And part of that plan is a timeline. So, I mean, we do just ask that should council choose to retender, that we be allowed to follow our original fundraising timeline, which has things kind of wrapping up in February. We do kind of think it would be detrimental to the campaign if we've raised $1.5 million, we stop for 3 months and we try to pick up the pieces. I don't think that's in our favor at all. And that's not what's being suggested. I just want to make that clear as well, that if council chooses to retender, that we can continue to use our original timeline and kind of keep rolling. We are likely going to run into where maybe some bidders aren't as keen to hand over the first check right away until we see a tender accepted. We realize that, but we think it's very important that we continue with that timeline, just because the plan is clearly working, and I think our results show that. That's kind of it for me. Roxanne has a few maybe finer details she's going to get into, but yeah, thanks for letting us be part of your agenda, and we're certainly here to answer any questions of council should they come up. But I'll just pass it over to our campaign coordinator there, Roxanne Nicholson.
Thanks,
Welcome,
Dan.
Roxanne.
Thank you. Really, I was just here if there was any questions for any of you on the fundraising report that you're able to look over from Nicole. She put together, a little something to say, hey, this is where we're at. This is what we project with the new, and she was working off the new cost, the over cost, like the over 3.1 that would have to be found somewhere, and saying maybe that had to be found in the community. Could we do that? Probably not, but we still feel we have a substantial amount of money to tap into yet in the community, because we really just started and we were feeling pretty good about our first week results. So basically, I was just here if there was a question about that fundraising report.
Are there any questions from member of council at this point to the delegated members? Okay, go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Sorry, I was a little slow there, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Thank you to Nicole and Dan and group for coming tonight. That $1.5 million that you have raised, how many years is that spread over, please? Or is it all going to be donated within the first year
No,
or 9 months or whatever?
Everyone that has been interviewed has had the opportunity to use a pledge of 5 years. So your council approved that back a few months ago. And so some people have chosen to pay the entire amount up front. I know we do have one substantial donor at $250,000, and their plan was $250,000 all at one time, but there are plenty of people that are spreading it over the 5 years. So when I bring forth what we have collected to the municipality, it'll always have the check value that we have plus the pledge donation. So you'll always see what our pledge donation amount is and what our check in hand say. And then the donor cards are filled out and people have put exactly how they want that laid out over the 5 years. Some people are only doing it over 2, some are 3, some are the 5, and sometimes the denominations are not equal amounts. So people have planned it. Some of it's according to what's going to be happening within their businesses, so they can make well on the tax deduction in certain years.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions of members of council at this time? I'm just going to add a couple comments, both to Dan and Nicole, or Roxanne. Really impressed with what you've accomplished at this point, and believe me, with all respect, you guys have done exactly what you said you were going to do. I can't get into any details at this point. I'm not even sure if the rest of council is aware of it, but I know there's still work going on in the background so that this thing doesn't get pushed back at this point. I can't share that publicly because I'm personally not the one doing the work, and I know that work is not completed as of yet, but certainly hoping that within the next month or month and a half that we will have more information to bring forward, and hopefully that information gets us right back on track. So please stand by. And again, thank you very much for the work that you are doing. And I can tell you that staff are still working towards trying to accomplish this project ASAP. Councillor Steffler, you had a comment?
Yes, it's for Dan. Dan, you're going to continue fundraising now, or are you going to take a hiatus?
No, the intention is to continue fundraising.
Thanks, Dan.
Yep. Thanks, Councillor Steff.
Okay, if there's nothing else for this delegation, again, thank you very much for your presentation. Go ahead, Councillor Steffler.
Yeah, I just have another. At what point then, Dan or Roxanne, would you say we're going to go ahead?
Sorry.
I guess that's kind of council's decision to accept the tender, right? I mean, we're going to do the best we can in fundraise, and like we say, we've already hit our minimum goal, but I guess that's kind of putting the ball back in your court there. We can't really say we're going to go ahead. It's not our building.
Well worded.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate your honesty.
All right, thank you very much. Our next delegation, Gary Boyer, Gray Fire Chief, Gray Fire Department, and Reed. This is merging of the Gray and Brussels Fire Department. Gary, I'd like to welcome you. Gary, if you don't mind, and I'm not taking any of these comments out of your speaking time, so your whole delegation, you will get your full opportunity time-wise to make your presentation after I make. I have 3 statements that I'd like to make, and then even after the time limit for delegation, we never stop it at that point. If there's still questions of council that you can answer and go back and forth, we never cut it off. We make sure that council gets all of the opportunity to make sure that they've heard everything that they need to hear. So thank you very much for coming. There's 3 things I want to talk about, and I hope there's a number of the public on, just so that everybody understands. I want, number 1 is to kind of explain how we got to where we are tonight. So I believe it was at the December 7th meeting, council was aware of and agreed on some initiatives that were going to be investigated and reported on over the course of a 6-month period. This issue tonight is only one of those initiatives. Some of them have already been reported back to council, and council has taken action on. I'm not sure if we've actually completed that entire list as of yet or not. I do believe it was around April 5th that information, or the council made the decision that they were then ready for this report to be worked on and information to come back to council. And that was in a public meeting again also. And I don't know the timeline on this, and I believe it was within the last couple of weeks, and I do not mind being corrected if I'm wrong with that, but I do believe our CAO at that time did meet with representatives from both the Gray and Brussels Fire Department and had a discussion with them. And that was during his process of gathering information for this report. And it was not just for Gray and Brussels, he also gathered information from the Seaforth Fire Department, because this review was for all fire services of Huron East Fire Departments. So that's kind of the first part. The still on this first topic is that the CAO was given a request by council of what to do, what information to bring back. And even though some people may or may not question any of the information in the report, I'm going to state that all the information in the report is actual black and white information, data that was gathered from historical records. So I don't think anybody's really questioning that information itself, because all of it is easily verifiable. The one thing that is always missing from reports that staff bring back, which then become council's responsibility, is we get the black and white figures, but it's council's responsibility to take that information and also figure out how that affects the overall public. And that's why we have a meeting like this now. So it's one thing to have the raw data, but we also, it's our responsibility as a council to figure out whether we want to act on it just based on raw data, or if we have to take other considerations into play. So that's how we get to this point. And I'm aware of the fact that the way our agendas are written up, and technically council would have had the authority, if they wanted to vote on something and pass it, they can do it. But I'm going to tell you that in over 20 years on this council, I have never, ever seen this council rush something through that would be considered a controversial issue for the public. Even if all the information was laid on the table, I've seen so many times where council has asked that let's put a pause on it. I want to think about it, maybe want some more input from the public. So I'm going to suggest that I do not believe anybody on this council had the intention of this being the last time that this would ever be talked about tonight. That was never going to be the case, but you do have to put it on the agenda at some point to bring it up and start the whole process. So I just want people to be aware of the fact that, yeah, this council has never done something like that. The second thing I want to point out is, Gary, you phoned me on Saturday.
Yes.
I appreciated the phone call for a couple of reasons. One, you were very direct with your concerns of how this affected the public in Gray, how it affected the firefighters at the Gray Fire Department, and what it would mean to them overall. It was a very good conversation. It wasn't yelling back and forth. You had some very direct questions. You needed some answers on things. I answered as much as I could, as best I could, because even at that time, I had not read the report. I was away for the weekend. But I thought it was a very good, constructive conversation. I really appreciated hearing your viewpoint on how this affected Gray and the firefighters. And I think that type of information becomes very beneficial to council overall in moving forward in making a wise decision for the benefit of everybody. So I'd like to say thank you very much for that call. And the one other thing that I want to thank, and Gary, I'm not a Facebook person, but I believe it was your wife that had put a comment on Facebook. And I would like to thank her if in fact she was the one that put it out there, where she talked about the fact that even if the fire department ended up moving to a different location, that the firefighters of Gray are there to serve the community, and they would still be there to serve the community going forward if in fact that ended up being council's decision. And I would like to thank her very much for those very honest comments. It shows the support of the firefighters to the community. It shows that they care whether they're one spot or another, but they want to serve. And that statement really helps diffuse a bad situation, because we don't want people to get their backs up. We want open, honest conversation. And thank you. And if you would pass on to her, thank her very much for that, because I thought that was a very good statement to make and put out there. So thank you for that. So having said my speeches for this evening, I'd like to welcome you, Gary, and go ahead and start your presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, sir, Mayor. I'd like to thank our mayor and the council for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. I'd like to introduce myself in case some are not aware who I am. Right beside me here, I have Station Chief Max McClellan, and he's got 29 years of service, 8 of that as Station Chief. Myself, I've been 34 years, and 11 of that has been Station Chief also. So bear with me, I'm not a public speaker, so just bear with me, please, okay? When we received the report, we immediately noticed the level of service was substantially lower for the Gray ward. Currently, Gray and Brussels have an excellent response time, day and night. and an excellent, with help from each other. That works very well. By the closure of the Gray Station and merging departments in the Brussels location, that would require the Gray firefighters to respond to the scene with personal vehicles, which is an issue we have been trying to eliminate. Furthermore, locating a new department in a central location outside of towns increases response time greatly. To respond to the hall to most Brussels and Gray firefighters living in the town at a closer proximity to the stations currently now. It was also noticed that the North Perth would provide fire coverage at a low cost on 86 Highway to Molesworth, thus still leaving the whole east side of Gray to a very high response time, which is very unacceptable to the taxpayers and the firefighters. Contrary to the report, Gray currently does respond to medical calls when required by EMS. Also, we feel that the cost to build and restructure the two fire departments would be considerably larger than what the report stated. Thus, the cost savings be less, if not nil. In summary, we are asking council to oppose the recommendations in the report and instead listen to over 700 people who have signed a petition in support of keeping Gray and Brussels fire stations open. It makes sense to standardize equipment use, training, protocols, and standard operating procedures for all Huron East Fire Service personnel. Undertaking a comprehensive review of fire vehicles, apparatus, and find an opportunity to low-cost savings into the future across the three stations in Huron East. But under no circumstances do we support the merge of the two stations. We are both proud of our stations and our firefighters. We leave you with one question. As current council members, are you willing to jeopardize property and lives to possibly save $1? Thank you.
All right, thank you for your presentation, Gary. Are there any questions of council at this time? Okay, so I don't see any direct questions, Gary, and I know that certainly the representatives from both Gray and Brussels have had an opportunity to meet with the fire service people on Sunday, which was great. You had one-on-one with them and an opportunity to express your views. I've talked to the CAO a number of times, and I have talked to a couple of the councillors. And certainly I've had my share of calls also from the public, and they've been good calls. They really have. I haven't had any problem with that. I'm going to say the very first call I got on Saturday morning was maybe a little early, and I wasn't as friendly as I should have been. But other than that, they were all pretty good calls. So, but I do want to just comment here that we've already listened to a lot of the information, and even staff have recommended that the 9 things that were listed in the report, they have already changed tonight, that they're breaking it out into a couple of different sections. So I think that is probably already a step in the direction of what you're hoping will be the outcome of this evening. Again, it comes up to the discussion that council will have and what they decide at that point. But I'm going to say at this point, I believe that both the community and the council are getting a lot closer together on the same page of where we are going to be at by the end of this evening. But again, thank you very much for your presentation. I appreciate that. And everybody is more than welcome to stay on until the meeting is over and council has had their discussion when we get to these agenda items. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right now, we are down to item number 9, and that is the accounts payable. And can I get a mover and a seconder for the accounts, please? Moved by Councillor Steffler, second by Councillor Morrison, that the accounts payable in the amount of $1,504,697.80 be approved for payment. Are there any comments or questions on the accounts as they were listed in your package? Councillor Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just had a question about page 49. I seen that the lawn master was mentioned on there, but there's no invoice description. So I'm not quite sure what they're being kind of paid for. It's in the amount of $1,704.
Okay, I can't answer that question, and then since
I don't know if Brad can answer it or I'll have to send an email to someone. But that's just my only question.
Okay, thank you for the question. And I'll give Brad a second to find the line. And since we don't have Paula here this evening, it may take us a couple extra seconds.
I will have to get back to you, Councillor Morrison, in terms of what that is, but I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor.
To Councillor Morrison's question, historically, we've bought a lot of grass seed off a lawn master for projects. I don't know if that might be the case this year as well. Maybe if Barry, is Barry on?
Barry is on. He's muted at the moment. I'm not sure if he's at. Oh, go ahead, Barry.
Yeah, here it could be either grass seed or they're do care of the memorial tree garden and so forth.
Mom has a headache.
Okay, we will get a confirmation though for you, Councillor Morrison, and make sure you get that information. Are there any other questions from council at this time? If not, all those in favor of paying the bills. And motion carries. Thank you. Number 10, reports and recommendations of municipal officers. And I turn to the Chief Building Official 2022-02 year-to-date building report. I'm not sure that I'm the person that can answer any of these questions, but if anybody has any, they could voice them, and we'll see that that Barry can get us answers. Go ahead, Councillor McClellan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just more or less, and it could be something that Brad could maybe answer as well. So they talk about tiny homes and how that's part of under the building code and stuff. So if you want to build a tiny home in your backyard, I suppose it's for housing. So is it all right to rent that house out then, or is that supposed to be? And I'd like to expand that to granny flats, because there are a lot of granny flats around too, but that used to be for like a family member or employees, housing for employees. So can them properties be rented out?
Well, I think it would depend upon what the zoning of that particular piece of property in question would be. So depending on what that's permitted on the land that's being proposed, but on the assumption that it was and it was being created, absolutely. I mean, a tiny home is something that could fit in there and be used as a unit. And I actually believe, I think, you know, part of some workshop discussions that we've got coming forward from the county planning department, we'll be talking about some of the initiatives that the province has been making towards permitting or requiring us to accommodate within our zoning bylaw that I guess what I call a secondary residence being permitted on certain properties. And so that would fit into that category. I think probably the biggest challenge I think that tiny homes are presenting, and it's kind of the subject of the CBO's report, is how are we going to make sure that where it's being manufactured and where it's being installed is sort of tracked from a building permit perspective. And that's the challenge of it. Certainly if it's constructed in the same municipality that it's being placed, that's pretty straightforward and easy. When it's being built somewhere else and put in place, it's different. Unlike sort of the Royal Homes of the world, they're a CSA standard, so there's no building permit. You know, the permit piece of that side of it where it was manufactured, there's no requirement for it. That's the challenge with these tiny homes.
And that's what I was wondering, if they were actually stamped, you know, like say there may be some place. And I mean, obviously if you wanted to sort of, let's say, stick build one in your backyard, you'd have to apply for a permit, you know, and at that point in time, Brad could say whether or not it was legal to do that.
Correct.
You know, so that crosses that off. But as far as importing one in from, let's say, Canadian Tire or whoever makes them, that's where or whoever does make them, but that becomes an issue then as to whether or not.
There's still be a building permit required. So even if it was
Yes.
manufactured somewhere else, there's a building permit required to construct it there. As soon as it comes into whatever the home municipality will be, a building permit will be required there, because there'll be a foundation required. There'll be plumbing permits required. So there's still a permit process, and that again would give the opportunity for the chief building official to go and review that from that perspective.
So do we have anything in our bylaws right now to address this? Say if I applied to build a tiny home in my backyard, be it wherever.
There's probably some challenges in our existing zoning bylaw in terms of how it's written with respect to tiny homes, in terms of, you know, minimum lot size coverage, things like that. That are some challenges, but I think that's part of some of that housekeeping bylaw work that'll be coming forward. And we'll have a workshop next week about.
Okay, well, one final question back to the granny flat. Let's say, for instance, I had a granny flat in my backyard and it was licensed to house, let's say, my mother. So my mother passed away. So can I rent that out now to somebody?
I don't, it's a tough question, because I don't know exactly how your existing zoning bylaw reads in terms of granny flats, but where I think provincial policies are going is that yes, could be a permitted use within your existing property.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and if I can just respond, Councillor McClellan, I don't know all the rules to that either, and our planner would probably have a lot more information. But I think the CAO had touched on something that was correct earlier, is that the zoning would make a difference, although the whole idea of these Airbnbs had for a while got around some of those zoning issues, but I think some municipalities are finding out ways to correct those concerns moving forward. But I don't know if anybody's figured the whole thing out as of yet, but it is being worked through for sure.
Well, it seems like everything's sort of changing on the fly, so it is. Yeah. And whether or not we can keep up to it or not. Thank you very much for the comments.
Yeah. Councillor Chartrand.
Yes, if we're going to be updating building standards when it comes to these tiny homes, if, for example, I purchase a tiny home from the company that builds them in Vanastra or wherever, it's one thing to get a building permit to put that tiny home on a foundation, whereas we have to ensure wherever that tiny home is built that it meets all electrical, plumbing standards and all the rest of that stuff. So whether it's CSA approved or stickered somehow, we have to ensure if we're allowing that vehicle or that tiny home being built somewhere else, that it's safe to put on that foundation that we're giving that building permit to.
You raise a very interesting point, Councillor Chartrand, and I think it's a very good point, because I raised it with the CAO a couple of months ago when we first got wind of this this possibly being the change to the rules. But as the CAO pointed out to me, is that the requirements of the factory where it is built, they need to do documentation, and there was even discussion about actual photographic documentation to support that the inspections were done at the right time and everything else, because you don't have the final building inspector there. And of course, they can't start taking walls apart that are already completed when the house is delivered. So although that was a concern of mine, my understanding is that staff have had conversations and felt quite comfortable, because of the regulations for the factory itself and the documentation that they would have to provide, that became a lot less of a concern, because they had already considered that also. But thank you very much for that question. Good question. Any other questions for council at this time on that report? Oh, Councillor Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just reading the report. It says that the current zoning bylaw doesn't obviously recognize tiny homes, but it does say that it will likely be revisited during the next zoning bylaw review. I just didn't know, was there some sort of timeline or some sort of expectation on how often that bylaw does get reviewed?
Good question. I think the last time it was reviewed was 2016. There's been, that was the last time we've done. It is due, and we do have sort of on our agenda, I guess, to do a housekeeping bylaw to the zoning bylaw. And actually, I believe some of that will be a discussion that council's having as part of a workshop next week on the housing strategy. So that's kind of, I guess, the lead into it. You'll get a little bit of background, and then from there, the planning department will work on proposed amendments to our zoning bylaw.
Okay. All right. If there's no other questions on that report, then we will go to 10.2, the VRC 2201 Recreation Program Service Agreement, County of Huron and Vanastra Recreation Center.
Fairly straightforward report. I don't know if there's any questions that council has. I'd be more than happy to ask or answer.
Any questions from members of council at this time? Seeing none. So then can I get a mover and a seconder for the agreement with the county? Moved by Councillor Wilby, second by Councillor Chartrand, that the council of the municipality of Huron East consider a bylaw to authorize the recreation program agreement with the county of Huron. All those in favor? And motion carries. 10.3, the mileage rate.
Yeah, so our current employee handbook has a prescribed table in there that would list what the mileage reimbursement rate would be based upon what the cost of fuel is currently within, I think we use Seaforth as a base. Unfortunately, that schedule's gotten to the point where the cost of fuel, as everybody's quite well aware of, is well beyond what that table schedule has in it. It did speak to, our old policy did speak to the concept that we would follow what County Huron does. Probably about 2 years ago, they actually revised their policy to follow the Canada Revenue Agency prescribed automobile allowance rates. So following in line with what the county's doing, I made a recommendation that we use their approach to it as well, and that prescribed number. It's set on an annual basis each year. So you can go to it for 2022. It's sort of set at a certain number, and then it's the same for the whole year. And then they reset it again in the subsequent year. So I just wanted to amend our policy just to be able to make sure that our fuel reimbursement for mileage for staff was reasonable, at least.
And just for a little bit of follow-up information there, I always thought the county had a very good system in place because it would do a calculation based on current fuel prices, which could go up and down each month, and the rate would adjust accordingly. But through the marvel of our federal tax system, what became a shock to us at County Council and certainly the Treasury Department up there was that, and let's say Canada Revenue decided we were supposed to collect 50 cents a kilometer for using personal vehicles. If we only paid someone 20 cents a kilometer, they actually had to pay income tax on the 20 cents a kilometer they collected because it wasn't the rate the government authorized. If you paid them 70 cents a kilometer, they still had to pay income tax on the 70 cents a kilometer. But if you don't charge or deviate from what the federal government authorizes for themselves, then you don't pay income tax on it. So there was no rhyme nor reason to their rules, but since we certainly didn't want employees to be penalized for using their own personal vehicles, we now follow that ruling of the federal government, and it makes perfect sense that that Huron East would do the same thing. So that was the justification of why we changed our system a couple of years ago. So can I get a mover and a seconder for the updates to the Handbook. I think moved by Councillor Dalton, second by Councillor Deal, that the council of the municipality of Huron East approve the amendment to the employee handbook, section 9, auto allowance as follows. Where a municipality of Huron East employee uses his or her personal vehicle in the course of employment duties, they are compensated for expenses at the following rates. The rate as established by the council for occasional use of an employee's personal vehicle or automobile allowance where the employee is designated to receive such an allowance by resolution of the municipal council, and claims for automobile allowance should be made monthly on the proper expense form available from the municipal office, and reimbursement rates for mileage traveled in one's personal vehicle while on municipal business with the rate to be established as per the Canadian Revenue Agency prescribed automobile allowance rates. Comments or questions? All those in favor? And motion carries. Thank you. And 10.4, Brussels Morris and Gray Community Center fundraising gift agreement delegation.
Yeah, so the fundraising coordinator, Nicole Duquette, has been working with me at various aspects, making sure that all the documentation that's being used for the fundraising program is reviewed and approved, and I've been bringing pieces of that at different times to council. So attached to my report gives you a sense of what the agreement looks like. We've reviewed it. We're recommending this to be adopted by council, but also that council, just to expedite these agreements, delegate authority for myself to sign these agreements to keep the process going with respect to the fundraising campaign. That being said, there's a bit of piece I think that for the most part, I believe Dan Fritz has spoken to in terms of the fundraising campaign, and it is quite surprising and quite a nice surprise to see that the fundraising campaign has been as successful as it has been in a very short period of time. And I appreciate the fact that they've recognized sort of that new target goal of 3.1 million, and I'll speak to that a little bit more in my next report. With that being said, I'd be happy to answer any of council's questions.
Does council have any questions at this time? Seeing none, can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Councillor On, second by Councillor Steffler. I caught your hand last time, Zoe. That the council of the municipality of Huron East consider a bylaw delegating authority for the chief administrative officer to execute gift agreements as part of the Brussels Morris and Gray Community Center renovation fundraising campaign. Comments or questions? All those in favor? And motion carries. Thank you. 10.5, the renovation tender results.
Yeah, so thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I think that I'm going to be asking council to defer their decision on this report. I've had some very recent information come forward to me as early as last Friday in conversations with the tender, Elgin Contracting and Restoration. We had a conversation late on Friday in regards to any opportunities to find some savings in the project. And at the same time, he'd had some opportunity to be able to speak to a few of his trades that I guess in the time frame of the tender was unable to get a hold of certain trades and get firm prices. So they made their best guess as to what they thought those were. So there's some very significant, and I'll leave it at that, as very significant additional savings that could help with that. And I think that as well, the fundraising goal is also giving us some positive news. So at this point in time, Elgin Contracting has in writing agreed to extend their bid offer to, I believe it's June 17th, which gives me enough time to be able to work with them to finalize any final prices and bring back a different report with a revised cost in it to the June 7th meeting of council. So that's kind of why I'm asking for it to be deferred.
So this is really just information for council at this time, but it's kind of inappropriate to ask specific numbers of the CAO, as is he is still in conversations with the potential builder. But are there any other questions other than dollar values that anybody had at this time? Okay, seeing none.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I see Councillor On has her hand up. I don't know if that means she, oh,
No, okay.
it's a hand up on her screen, so I don't know what that means.
Okay. No, I don't see it on mine. Okay. So with that, since it's being deferred, there is no motion at all. Is that correct? Okay. All right. Thank you. So then we are down to 10.6, and this is the Huron East Fire Services. And the first one is motion 1 of 2. As I've stated earlier, we've broken out some of the items that were recommended.
So I'll go through the report, Mr. Mayor, and then you can speak to the difference of the resolutions. So I think, Mr. Mayor, you gave a fairly good background as to how we got to the point where this report was coming forward. And you did reference the consultations I had with the 2 fire halls, Brussels and Gray. And out of that, you know, there were certainly some really good solid points given with respect to some of their concerns. And I'm just going to list them because I know there's some public people on the call here, and I'll go through this report pretty comprehensively. So one of them was a lack of standardization of equipment. So some of the firefighters were concerned that between the 2 fire halls, there might be some different types of equipment and how would they potentially work, particularly with, I think it was the air tanks I think they were speaking about. Certainly they expressed a concern about increased response times. There was some reference to the fact that the fire district boundaries as they currently exist are sort of non-logical, especially between Gray and Brussels. There was a challenge of flow for increased personnel through the Brussels Fire Hall. So, you know, trying to figure out how, if we had all firefighters from the 2 existing fire halls, how would they flow through an existing building, being relatively small, and trying to make that work. It took a long time for the 2 fire halls to begin to work together, and this process would upset that relationship. There was a concern about what, if any, were increased liability. Challenges with the current practice of Gray firefighters arriving at the scene versus the fire hall. And I think District Chief Boyer spoke to that as well. Lack of standardized training and standard operating procedures across, I guess, pretty much all of Huron East fire services. Noted Gray does not currently respond to medical calls. I guess Chief Boyer also mentioned that they do in some cases. But there was expressed concern by the Brussels that there'd be an increased number of medical calls for them because they do respond to medical calls. Some concerns about how female firefighters were treated. Challenges of Brussels daytime fire response was mentioned. Impact of firefighters. So the point would being is that if they're merged, then there'd be that many more calls that they would have to respond to, and therefore what impact that would have on the firefighters themselves. Potential increase of post-traumatic stress disorder due to the increased number of calls. Of course, the local elementary school being in Ethel. Increased cost of homeowner insurance. And the opportunity to reduce costs significantly without closing Gray Fire Hall. So they did indicate in those conversations that they had other ideas and strategies. As expected, there's significant resistance from the Gray Fire Hall, particularly from the Gray Fire Hall in terms of the closure of the Gray Fire Hall. And there is or will be no significant resistance to closure of the Gray Fire Hall. There is or will be significant resistance from the community as well. And I recognize that, and I wanted to acknowledge that. It's not the report is looking at it from more of a factual base, but certainly fire services do provide a sense of community. Certainly, residents will be concerned about a reduction in level of service. It's always difficult for municipalities to reduce levels of service. The perception of increased financial impact, the perception of lost life, health, or safety, historical animosity over amalgamation, even though it's literally 21 years ago at this point in time, and the historical significance. I mean, Gray Fire Service has been there for generations, and many firefighters have dedicated their time and their efforts for years and generations at that fire hall. So there's a few themes I guess I kind of picked out that I kind of worked through from a standpoint of how I developed this report, and it was really the lack of standardization, the financial impacts, and the service levels. I'll start with standardization. I'll just kind of quickly surmise it. One of the sort of the systematic issues with the fire service is that there's not really a standardization of the type of equipment they use in all 3 fire districts. And that's probably paramount to make sure that, you know, and I'm not saying it happens often, but if there's ever a circumstance where, you know, equipment was needed for a major emergency and the equipment wasn't transferable, I guess is the word, that could create some challenges for us. And I think the other piece of it is that, you know, if it's not standardized, we miss those opportunities of being able to get fairly procurement opportunities, buying more in bulk or having standardized costing agreements. One of the questions was raised with respect to insurance, and it was a question I honestly I didn't have an answer for at the time. I did spend quite a bit of time, and actually kudos to someone to be able to help me from an insurance broker to be able to give you some sense. And so pretty much all of here in East, for that matter, except for those places that have supplied water services that are in close proximity to a fire hydrant, will all be in what I call a grade 2 category, just from the standpoint that, and that won't have any impact whether you left the gray fire hall or you merged the 2 halls together. So that didn't have any impact at the end. So the net issue is that insurance isn't going to be an increase to any of the residents as a result of any decision council makes. Service levels and service boundary. I've mentioned this before, that the boundaries right now are probably inappropriate. It just doesn't make sense to have a boundary between the 2 fire halls if they were going to continue to exist, to have them, you know, the way they're laid out right now. It should be what is the closest fire hall to whatever point in time. And so I think there certainly should be an effort made to revise those existing boundary limits if council determines not to move forward with merging the 2 fire halls. So I spoke to that. I've already spoken in my previous report about sort of the distances, and I didn't really work with response times. I worked more from just a distance, a straight line distance, to give council a sense. They're fairly consistent. You know, certainly both Gray and Brussels probably have a higher service level than Seaforth. When you look at the overall ranges of distance that's from a fire hall. So I won't speak too much further about that. I've spoke to that previously. In terms of service level costs, one of the questions I think was asked is, what is the cost per household to provide fire service? In this case, it was particularly Gray. And I don't have household numbers on a ward basis. I do have household numbers from Statistics Canada that's provided to me or is available publicly, but they don't break it down into the former townships. So I had to go through a process of prorating those households across to the different wards. So I used the 2018 ward elector numbers and prorated it based upon that to give you a general sense as to the number of households per ward, and used the budget from 2022 to assess what the actual cost per household would be. And I did actually do the same thing for a few other municipalities surrounding us, just to give council a sense as to where we fit in. So big picture wise, we're not sitting too bad in terms of how our cost for fire service overall comparatively, I guess you could say, to our southern and northern neighbors. We're all kind of in that same realm. Maybe they're a little bit higher, but we're still pretty good. The Brussels number is a little bit wonky. It's probably reflecting the fact that, and just so council is aware, I've already discounted the cost, or at least the payment that Morris Turnberry provides to the municipality for their portion of the fire service area. So it's just a fairly high number. And when we look at Gray and Brussels combined, it's sitting around 240, which is, you know, above what the overall here in East cost is, and fairly well above what Seaforth was. So certainly from a standpoint of looking at here in East only, the costs are a little bit higher in the north than they would be, say, in the south. That's probably the best way to surmise that. terms of fire calls, there's a table provided in the report, gives you a general sense of fire calls. Interestingly, looking at the 5-year average of calls, if you actually added the Brussels and Gray 5-year average total calls and looked at the Seaforth total calls, they're about almost very equal. So they're almost completely equal. So it makes it, makes sense from a standpoint when you're looking at it from a number of fire calls. In terms of financial considerations, and I know when I presented to council at the last meeting, I kind of had ruled out the concept of having a combined public works and a merged fire hall somewhere in the vicinity between Gray and Brussels, only from a standpoint from cost. But when we got a new cost number from the designer for the renovations to the Brussels Hall at $200 a square foot, and I worked that through the process again and actually got some updated, what I call market value for those surplus properties. It started to make the economics look a little bit better overall. So if we did construct a new building that combined both fire and public works for what I call Gray and Brussels, it would actually potentially have a savings when you discount the equipment savings, as well as the additional taxation revenue and the savings from an energy standpoint. You could look at probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $25,000 to $30,000 worth of savings per year. Then I kind of looked at the same analysis, looking at it from a standpoint if we just expanded the existing Brussels fire and the paramedic services and merged into that one. There's a bit more savings looking at it from that standpoint, but I looked at it from the standpoint that there might be a more, I guess, appetite to accept a merging of the two fire halls if they were physically in a new building and there wasn't sort of this home turf stake perspective coming into play. So that's kind of a quick nutshell of where I went through the report. Quick summary of some of the issues I found through this process is the lack of standardization throughout here in East Fire Services. No implications of increased insurance on residential homes if Brussels and Grays were merged. Merging of the Brussels and Gray fire districts would equalize fire service levels throughout here in East. Service level costs per households are currently higher in Brussels and Gray fire district than in the Seaforth fire district. Combined fire calls in the Brussels and Gray fire districts are generally equal to the Seaforth fire district. Cost of construction of a new fire hall and public works building for a combined fire public works building is financially supportable without any additional capital contributions based upon a $200 per square foot cost. Workplace harassment may be prevalent in the fire services, and centralized improved leadership is required within the here and East Fire Services. So those were the key points that I brought out as part of my review. Happy to answer any questions from council.
Any questions from members of council at this time? Okay, seeing none. We have, or staff has already broken this down into 2 steps. I'm going to go through the first motion and then I might have a comment before I read the second motion. Can I get a mover and a seconder for the first motion, please? Moved by Councillor Morrison, second by Councillor Wilde, that the Council of the Municipality of Huron East direct Huron East Fire Services to undertake the following. 1, establish standardized equipment use across all Huron East Fire Services. 2, establish standardized training protocols for all Huron East Fire Services personnel. 3, establish standard operating procedures for all Huron East Fire Services personnel. And 4, all fire services personnel undergo workplace harassment training. And 5, undertake a comprehensive review of fire vehicle apparatus and develop non-biased justification reports for each apparatus. Comments or questions on the motion as it was read? Councillor McClellan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to administration. When you say Huron East Fire Services to do this review, who are you talking of?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that would be the entire fire department.
The three departments, Brad?
3 districts, correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of members of council at this time? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To Brad, please. Is that this review will be done in-house?
I'm just looking at the options here. I would say that it would be done in-house. It would certainly be done through that, joint consultation between the 3 districts. Yes.
Okay.
That comprehensive review of vehicle apparatus it's not overly sophisticated. It just needs to be something that makes sure that when we look at new purchases of equipment, that it's truly justified and we've evaluated all options.
Do you know, Mr. McRoberts, if there is the province has a standardized training procedure and standardized equipment requirements?
I'm not sure whether the province has what I would call a standardized equipment or training process. They have certification levels that they have for various firefighters. And that's something that's a fairly recent and more recently being amended as well. And it's kind of coming about right now. And I'm sure the fire chief will report to you on that once that's kind of finalized. I think he's giving you a sort of brief updates on it. But I don't believe, I think what we're getting at is making sure that the more standard operating procedures training piece of it, that's sort of done more generalized on a local level and not so much the specific training. Does that make sense?
Yep. No, I know the province has mandated that firemen reach a certain level within 3 years, and I didn't know if we would use that as our minimum or our maximum or whatever. I just wondered how it would evolve. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah.
The only comment I have is that I became aware of some of this information within the last couple of weeks. I was surprised as a member of council that we did not have a standardized training process for all of the firefighters in here in East. I was aware of the fact that each fire department could always pick and choose how they wanted their equipment designed and things like that. And I never really gave it a second thought before, but it does make a lot of sense, especially if we have to use multiple of our own departments because there would be a major fire someplace in the municipality. And if more than one here in East Fire Department attended, that a firefighter wouldn't need instructions on how to go and do a job. They would already know how to do it with the equipment that was there on site. So these steps here, I consider these just good due diligence on behalf of our fire services that we offer to the public as going ahead with standardizing all of these. But that's of course my personal comment to what I've got here. Are there any final comments or questions of council before I call the vote? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion as it was read. 1, 2, 3. And motion carries. Thank you. The second part of this motion, which deals with certainly what was more the concern of firefighters and members of the public, which had to do also with the possible closing and amalgamation. I just want to start off with a personal comment here is that the problem sometimes when you do reports is you've got factual data and it's all there. But when I wasn't even aware of the fact that we don't train everybody the same, we don't always buy the same equipment. They're not, it's not apples to apples. So the information we received was all factual, but how often can you always compare the information when you're not comparing apples to apples? So although based on just the black and white data, these other recommendations may have made perfect sense. I think we're all aware of the fact that there is concern that we're doing something and getting rid of an historical establishment that has been around for a long time, that I would ask that, or certainly I would like to see that instead of moving ahead with this motion that was a valid recommendation, that we consider at least giving the changes that are going to happen from the motion that we just passed at least 3 years to take foothold before we even do any kind of a comparison between departments again, and see if we get some of our ducks in a row. We've already been made aware of the fact that some of the costing of some of the northern departments may be out of whack, but not because of the departments themselves, but because of decisions that council have made in agreements that have got us to these locations. So that's just kind of my spitballing of why I think the first part is very good business for the municipality to undertake. But I do believe in my heart that holding off on the second one for a time frame to see how those changes actually affect the overall operation and the municipality might be in everybody's best interest at this time. And can I get a mover and a seconder? I still have to put the motion on the floor. Moved by Councillor Deal and second by Councillor On. And I'll read the motion as it was printed, and that is that the Council of the Municipality of Huron East direct Huron East Fire Services to undertake the following. 1, over the next 5 years, phase out the Brussels and Grey fire districts into a into a Huron East North Fire District. 2, over the next 5 years, phase out the Seaforth Fire District to the Huron East South Fire District. 3, undertake formal discussions with Huron County and the potential for a lease-based takeover of the Brussels Fire Hall for the Brussels Paramedic Services Base. And 4, establish a joint building working group from Grey Fire, Brussels Fire, and Public Works to develop designs for a new Public Works North Operations Center, North Fire District Fire Hall. Comments or questions on the motion as I've read it? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What I was thinking on this myself was the first thing was there was what I listened to, there was a comment about public input, and I don't think we allowed enough time for that. So I was going to ask that this be deferred for at least a month. And then the more I thought about it, I wondered if we should defer it until 23. But you're proposing a 3-year deferral? Is that what
I am
got
at
from
this.
your preamble?
Yes, I am. That's correct. And the 3-year deferral is not that we bring back these motions, just that we update our information and see if in fact the changes that council has already made has got us to where we need to be, or if in fact we need to do anything else at that time. But yes, I am asking that, and I'm not putting a timeline in. That was just my suggestion, that we need to give these departments at least 3 years with the new training, possibly standardizing of equipment, and see what effect that has. I wasn't putting in a motion of a timeline.
I said 23. I meant 24. Yeah, that was kind of my thinking, Mr. Mayor, but I wasn't thinking 3 years. I was thinking January, February 24. But I think there is more time needed to digest and look at the picture a bit better, especially the service area, et cetera, et cetera. Thank you.
Okay. And just if I can respond to that, Deputy Mayor, The reason I wanted to look at the extended time frame is that I remember the first time that this council sat down and talked about an economic development officer. If you're only going to hire someone for 1 year and expect to see results at that point, there's no sense in hiring someone for that first year, because those type of results have to be cultivated. You have to give them time to actually start to work. And that's why I didn't want to rush getting back to the process until there's been an opportunity to see whether it was good, bad, or indifferent. And it was for that kind of justification that I wanted to go at least 3 years.
The structure's in place though, and it would give the new council a year to look at it, et cetera. But yeah, I see where you're going.
Okay. Councillor Chartrand.
Yes, I would also want to include in this time that we're allowing for all the new stuff to happen. In reading and in listening to some of the comments, there was a lot of suggestions on how the 2 fire halls could possibly have their own savings. There was some suggestions that the Gray Fire Hall had for cost savings. It would be interesting to see in the next report also include what are the potential cost savings that were recommended by the individual fire halls.
Okay. Yeah, and I don't think that the staff, whether we're talking about the fire chief or the CAO, are only going to take just the information that was in these motions. I realize that they've also found other things and they're working towards other efficiencies. My comments were basically specifically just about the 4 lines that were listed there, but I agree with you. There's still probably more things we can do. They're just not listed in these motions. Councillor Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. More of probably a comment more than anything. I originally made the motion on April 5th to go ahead with the concept review of it. And part of that motion was public consultation. And I think it's probably not a shock to the council, from at least the constituents that I've talked to, that has not really happened, or at least has not happened on the scale that it should have. So I don't believe, and I do agree with all of your comments about how the first 5 recommendations in the first motion should be sought through before we continue forward. I don't believe that the motion at stance of phasing out should go through. I'm against that. I think more time needs to be given to see how the first motion sees. And I also believe when this is brought back in 2, 3, 4, however many years, that there does need to be a much more extended public consultation period. That's all I'd like to say.
All right, thank you for those comments. Councillor Deal, did you have a comment? I thought I saw your hand earlier.
Yes, I do. I agree with Councillor Morrison here. The public consultation is a huge miss in all of this. We need to get the feel of what everybody is thinking. And yes, the first 5 motions, it makes total sense to do these reviews on these motion or on those 5 recommendations. I'm sure everyone's a little shocked that they're not all standardized. I think just a little more thought process, a little better numbers. You know, the CAO talked of $200 per square foot. With equipment savings, we need to discuss those things with not only with amongst ourselves, but with the departments. Like, you can only go without so much equipment, and standardizing it is difficult because every year the standards on the air tanks and that apparatus, they all change. So you may have enough air tanks to outfit the whole unit, but they're based over, 10 or 15 years. So of course, they can't be standard. You can't, as you said, Mr. Mayor, you can't look at apples to apples when you're looking at that diversity in just the year's worth of equipment. So yes, I totally agree that this needs to be set aside. We'll look at this again, and whether it's 3 or 4 or 5 years down the road. Thank you.
Thank you. Did I see your hand up, Councillor McClellan?
Yes, she did. So yes, I'm going to speak against the motion that you have on the floor. The first thing is very disheartening when you see phase out. That's a line in the sand there. So it's just pitting department against department again. I just think we should be trying to encourage. Therefore, with with the fire services looking towards things, working together will certainly help. I just worry about amalgamating Gray into Brussels, because actually you're going to make extra calls for them volunteer firefighters, and you look at the impact of where them volunteer firefighters work. Their employer, they have to give up their man twice as often now, or twice as much, and it's very hard if you're an employer trying to employ a volunteer firefighter. They're happy that they have volunteers on their staff, but if that volunteer is running out the door twice as often, it gets to be a bit of a hard challenge. Secondly, with the growth that's happening in Ethel and in Cranbrook, I don't think now is the time to lower the level of service. I think we need to keep it and maybe enhance it if we can in any way. Anytime you lower the level of service, it's not a good thing. It's a hard sell. And I just found the statement in there that we're asking Brussels and Gray to lower their level of service to match up with the South services. It's just not a good feel. So like I said, I think our department, actually, when we talked to them, they suggested that we could even review this every 2 years to see if we're heading in the right direction with the 3 departments. Somebody mentioned about the savings that were, some of the departments have mentioned how they could come up with some savings on their own. I'd like to see that explored. So I'd like for the firemen to be listened to. So I would, if they have something, and see if it would work. The final point was just the public consultation being missed here. I think it could have helped a lot if it had been maybe explored a little bit more. So thank you.
Okay. If I can just respond to the comment about the public consultation. It's almost a chicken and an egg thing. I realized the report was coming in front of council tonight, and council had to do a vote. But as the deputy mayor said, he was certainly going to ask for more time to be extended. And again, it goes back to what I said earlier. I've never seen this council get something that could be controversial for the public and it instantly happen. But it becomes really tough that the CAO was asked to put a report together and present it to council, which he did. But at this point, council certainly has the opportunity to say, all right, now we want to go and do that public consultation to see what the public think about if we go ahead with this, if in fact we were at that stage where we decided we were going to do something that would be affecting the public. It's pretty tough for the CAO to be putting together a facts and figures report and ask him to go out and do the survey with the public, because that is really council's responsibility at this point. Is the ratepayers are the ones that elect us to these positions. So it now becomes our responsibility to make sure that their voice is heard when we get down to that final decision. I don't disagree with the fact that it may appear that we were sidestepping the public, but I do not believe in my heart that that was ever going to happen. I think council would have made sure that the public were going to have an opportunity to put comments in if in fact we thought we were heading down the direction to actually do an amalgamation or a closure of a fire hall. That's just my personal comment. Go ahead, Mr. Roberts.
Do you guys still hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, the first question was the timeline. So I know Deputy Mayor had mentioned that, maybe, January, February of 2024. And I think, to be fair, if we're going to try to implement some of these recommendations, that might be a little bit early. if we figure it takes a year to kind of work through the kinks and figure out what works, and then at least a year of sort of a record to sort of say what's the track record looking like, to give you some, I guess what I'll call statistics or some data or some information to bring back. You almost need to have that cycle. So Mr. Mayor, probably 3 years probably would be a minimum timeline to look at it. And on the public consultation side, I recognize that, yes, I didn't do public consultation, but I purposely didn't do public consultation, mainly from a standpoint that there's no point having public consultation and upsetting a lot of people if council is not going to support the direction. So that was why I think the language I wrote in there was the 5-year sort of time frame, was to give that opportunity for not only for council to give direction, but also for us to go through the process of figuring out how this is all going to work and having public consultation as part of that process. Because it's not much sense having public consultation if you don't have information and you don't have a direction, and you can't really provide them with a fulsome, I guess, perspective of where this is going and what it means. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Go ahead, Councillor Morrison.
Just a slight response to that. I totally agree with basically kind of what both of you have stated. But I do just think by saying, by giving them that 5-year timeline, it is like Councilor McClellan said, it is still a line in the sand. Like, as much as a motion can change after the fact, and you can do the public consulting in that 5 years, to the public's eye, that 5 years is set. And while that can change, I mean, obviously by the petition that's been going around, this is not the direction that the public has wanted, and they wanted more input. And like I said, I made the original motion, and part of it was public consulting. So I totally get what you both have stated, in which that it could be done after the fact, and there's no point in doing it without some more figures. But from the public's eye, that is obviously not the direction that they would have wanted it to go.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much for those comments. Go ahead, Councillor On.
I just want to say something that I wouldn't mind seeing added that I didn't know about, was that Seaforth Grey and Brussels, their chiefs do not meet during the year to discuss things. And I think that's a really important part of coming together and working together as a group, as a combined Huron East. So I would like to see that happen, and possibly a report come, every 6 months to council from the chiefs, stating the things that they have done, and how this is helping them.
Okay.
Chief and officers too, maybe.
Yeah, just to respond to that, Councillor On, I have absolutely no problem with the request, although that request can be a separate motion either tonight or at a future meeting. It's not actually just part of the 4 items we're discussing, although I do not disagree with the direction or a variation of the direction that you are going on. Councillor McClellan.
No, I was just going to add on to what Councillor On was talking about. That's all. So if she's going to bring it up later on, then I'll add to it then.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So at this point, it's just the motion that is on the floor that I've read that talks about those 4 items, whether council passes them or rejects them at this point. And certainly, Councillor On, if you want to tonight, council could waive the rules and you could put a motion on the floor, or when we get to future motions, you could just mention the fact that you want to bring one about getting a report and looking into the possibility of that joint committee. Any final questions based on the motion as it was read? Councillor Deal.
I think we should go to a recorded vote for this.
Okay.
Okay, so if we are ready for the recorded vote as requested by Councillor Deal, I will be reading the motion as read by the mayor, so that the council of the municipality of Huron East direct Huron East Fire Services to undertake the following. 1, over the next 5 years, phase out the Brussels and Grey Fire districts into a Huron East North Fire District. 2, over the next 5 years, phase out the Seaforth Fire District to the Huron East South Fire District. 3, undertake formal discussions with Huron County and the potential for a lease-based takeover of the Brussels Fire Hall for the Brussels Paramedic Service Base. And 4, establish a joint building working group from Gray Fire, Brussels Fire, and Public Works to develop designs for a new Public Works North Operations Center / North Fire District Fire Hall. Yay means that you are in favor of the vote as read, and nay means that you are opposed to the vote as read. I will start with Councillor Deal.
No.
Deputy Mayor Fisher.
No.
Mayor McClellan.
No.
Councillor McGrath.
Nay.
Councillor McClellan.
No.
Councillor Morrison.
Nay.
Councillor On.
No.
Councillor Steffler.
No.
Councillor Wilby. Sorry, Councillor Wilby.
No.
Thank you. Councillor Chartrand
Nay.
and Councillor Dalton.
Oh, still muted.
I can hear you. Oh.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to say I didn't catch that, Councillor
Nay.
Dalton. Thank you. That was a nay. So that is unanimous.
It's nay.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
No, yeah. That was unanimously defeated.
Okay, thank you very much. I need a mover and a seconder to receive the reports of municipal officers. Moved by Councillor Morrison, second by Councillor Chartrand. Get this right. That Huron East Council received the following reports of municipal officers as presented. 1, the chief building official, 2, the Venastra Recreation Manager, and 3, the CAO. All those in favor? And motion carries. Thank you. Correspondence. Is there?
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Certainly, but I'm sure council has read it. Certainly, it's a request from the homecoming committee looking for council support for about 5 items there. 1 is to waive the rental fees for the use of the ball diamonds to host their events on the weekend. They would like to close a section of Sports Drive between Cutchin Drive and Flora Street for a specified period of time. They want to do a kids zone in this area. So they had already requested, I think, the closure of, I can't remember the street, but the one on the north side of the park. They would also like to close a section of Dunedin Drive from Turnberry Street to Stretton Street for our soapbox derby from 7 a.m. to 12 p.m. Council waiving the charges and permits associated with us hosting a food truck at our event. And we'd also ask that the mayor or a member of council attend the opening ceremonies on Friday, July 29th. That's their request. So any questions from council?
Councillor McClellan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Brad. Brad, did they say what day for the soapbox derby? Because I think it's Sunday, but I don't know whether they've got that in there or not.
You're right. It doesn't actually have a date in there. I believe Dan Fritz is still on the call. If council's okay, maybe he could answer that question for us.
Sure.
Yeah, sorry, that's an oversight on my end. It is the Sunday, Councillor McClellan.
Thank you. I was sure it was.
Councillor Morrison, you had a question?
Councillor McClellan asked the same one.
Okay, all right, thank you. Are there any other questions of council? I'm going to bring up one thing. The whole waiving of, and probably most members of council will remember, we've had this discussion before. And I think it's come up a number of times when the deputy mayor has asked about the money that I think was always being raised for the food bank through the Saturday soup cook-off thing, where they always asked if those funds could be just waived. And if I remember correctly, it was advice from staff that we don't waive them, that what we do is council through their own budget gives a grant in the amount, because every time we approve waiving the funds from one of the centers, that throws the center's budget out. And then we complain about the fact that they're not keeping on budget when we're the ones that said, well, somebody didn't have to pay for using your services. So council should at some point come up with a plan on how we want to handle these events going forward, because we do have to be fair to the individual boards that are trying to live within the budgets that that they've had approved. And it doesn't help if we take their knees out from under them with a half a dozen events during the year. So my question would be, would anybody like to, if we're going to approve this, would anybody like to make a motion of how those rental fees get paid? Councillor Steffler.
Yeah, I would make a motion that we just go ahead and pass it. This is a homecoming. It doesn't happen as often as what the food bank's asking for that. And I'm a member of the food bank here in Seaforth. So that's a yearly thing once this whole thing's over. But this is a homecoming once in 50 years. So I would make a motion that we accept the recommendation.
And I understand the point that you're making, but all I'm saying is that at the end of the day, it's coming out of Huron-East's pocket no matter what. I just don't want to shortchange the staff at the community center. So could the motion just read that staff be directed to find the funds in the current Huron-East budget? And that way staff could pull it from where they feel it's appropriate, but we don't affect the funding from the BMG.
That's certainly doable, Mr. Mayor, from our approach.
Okay. I still need a mover and a seconder to go ahead with whatever we're gonna. Okay, I got a mover, Councillor McClellan, second by the Deputy Mayor. Any final comments or questions? All those in favor? And motion carries. Thank you. And I guess since everybody approved that, that means I'm showing up on the 29th. So that's fine. Happy to be there. I don't see anything under unfinished. Municipal drains, quarter revision, 14th concession drain. I do believe that quarter revision has already happened.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. And so we are down to planning, 14.1 planners report consent application. And this is a follow-up from the last meeting with Cody Deal. And welcome. Oh,
sorry, Mr. Yeah, we should have Councillor McClellan report out for the quarter revision.
Sorry for that oversight. Go ahead, Councillor McClellan.
No problem. Yes, earlier tonight we had a quarter revision for the 14th concession drain back here in the Gray Ward. we had a number of applicants or appellants, I should say, however you say that were opposed to their assessment for the drain. We had one in agreement with it, but in the end, I'm going to try to read off what we decided. We recognize that the main beneficiary of the 14th concession drain works was the owners of the 1866025 Ontario Inc. property. The other owners affected by the drain all said that they weren't against the clean out, but not the deepening. So we decided to reduce the benefit assessment on the Haverkamp, Albright, Van Veen, Rathwell, Menzie properties by 5% to each property, and therefore raising the 1866025 Ontario Inc. properties by the amount of roughly about $5,600. So we basically just took 5% away from them, them landowners, and applied it to the other properties. So that was the motion that was posted and voted on and passed. So,
okay, all right. Thank you for that update. All right, down to 14.1, and welcome, Jen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So this is just an update from our May 3rd council, whereby consent application C12 of 2022 was deferred for the opportunity for the applicant to have some further discussions with staff to see if there was any sort of compromise or proposed changes from the proposed 10-acre surplus farmhouse severance down to a smaller size that staff would be in support of. We had some really good conversations with the applicant. However, the outcome of those conversations is that the applicant would like to proceed with the 10-acre lot size. And so as such, the planning report has not changed, and the staff recommendation still is that the application be approved with the reduction from 10 acres down to 3.5 acres. All of that to say, the applicant's wish is still that council consider the 10-acre the 10-acre size, and staff are still in a position where they are unable to support the applicant's request. I do know that the applicant is with us this evening and may have some further information as to why they are looking for that 10 acres, but just an update to let council know that there were some good discussions, but just with the policies that we have in place and how we generally review these types of applications, the staff recommendation and the applicant's request both have not changed. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Any questions from members of council? And just to let everybody know, everyone's probably already seen it, but I know the applicant also sent an updated letter with some comments to try and strengthen their application. But I didn't know if members of council had any further questions for the planner or if they had any questions for the applicant. Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To Jen, please. I know that recently the DeCroon one was defeated, Jen, and I don't remember in my 3 years on county, but previous to that, do you know of any precedents that could be used to help push this through? This is something that I am really, really a strong advocate of niche market produce, niche market agricultural production, whatever you want to call it. I'm strongly in favor of this. So I'm going to vote in favor of the 10-acre parcel, but I didn't know if there was a precedent that could be used to help Mr. Deal in this process.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's a good question. And I know we always say in planning, there's no, we review each application on its own rationale and such. So while each surplus farmhouse severance may sound very similar, they all have their own intricacies, I guess I would say. And so as far as there's not one that I can think of that is similar enough, I guess, to be used as an example. But all of that to say, I understand your position and why you may feel strongly about this one in particular. But there's not one that comes to mind that is exactly like this one with the request to have more space for market gardening.
Thank you.
Councillor Chartrand.
Yes, I've been thinking about this, and based on the last presentation by Jen and looking at the layout, I mean, the 10-acre request, it kind of squares off the property. Whereas when you get to 3.5, it shortens the property. And I like their ideas of what they have planned on it, and I would be in support of the 10 acres as well.
Okay. Councillor McClellan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just general comments. I mean, and the only thing I'm worried about is the precedent that we set by doing this, if we allow this. If a person could do it on a per person basis, I know this gentleman, when he says he's going to do this, that's what he's going to do. You just hate to see it done. We do it the next time, and the next time you drive by, somebody's got a dirt bike track set up on it. So I'm going to vote in favor of it. I just hope it doesn't come back to bite us. That's all for the 10 acres. Thank you.
Councillor Steffler.
Yeah, and I read Mr. Deal's letter, and it was a very impressive letter, and I think it was written from his heart. I look at the Mennonite farmers up in ACW, and they seem to make a good living off 10 acres, market gardening and whatnot. So I would propose, and I would make a motion, if that's what it takes, that we go ahead with and we approve a 10 acre severance. And Mr. Mayor and Mr. Deputy Mayor speak up in favor of Mr. Deal at the county.
Okay. Is there any other comments of members of council at this time? I only have one for the applicant. I did phone in the office today, Cody, and I stated that I thought your letter was well worded. I suspect that a question that would possibly come when this gets put in front of county is that what would the time frame be, and are you talking about using the majority of the other 6.5 acres for all of this farming that you're referring to in the letter?
Afternoon, councils. Yeah, basically that's our game plan, is to, by all definition, remain or keep the remaining 6 acres all agriculture by all definitions. I don't plan on putting, like Councillor McClellan said, like a dirt bike track or anything like that on the property. Our sole purpose is to pursue the market and specialty crop. How long will that take? Not 100% sure. I mean, we're just starting out. So I mean, in order for that to come to fruition, this would first have to happen.
No, but and the reason I'm asking you the question is I suspect that question will get asked at the county level. And the reason I'm stating that is that because there's normally a time frame on some of these things to meet all the conditions. We've had people say that, you know what, maybe 5 years down the road, I'll get to that. That's not usually an acceptable answer. If it's something that you have specifics about, that makes or carries a lot more weight, I'll say, when it comes to discussing these things. And that's why I was asking the question, if you had an actual game plan that had a timeline.
Like I said, this year we're just starting out with and trying things out. I would assume within the next 3 years, possibly have it, or considerable amounts of it, underway.
Okay, Councillor Chartrand.
Is it possible that as a condition that it's wrote in that the 6.5 acres, even though that we okay the 10, but the 6.5 acres has to remain as agricultural? Can that be wrote in as a condition?
I'll go to the planner, but I've never seen that.
So that was a first for everything.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there's no way to condition it through the consent itself. So the applicant would have 2 years to meet the conditions that are outlined if the consent was approved at the county level. The only way I guess I could see potentially, if council wanted to go down the road of requiring a rezoning on the 6 acres to require that those 6 acres solely be used for market gardening and other agricultural uses, that would be possible. Or we could potentially look at the boundary of the AG2. So the AG2 zone is the restricted agriculture zone, which is automatically applied to the retained farmland. So it'd be possible that maybe a portion of the 10 acres be zoned AG2, which would prohibit any buildings to be constructed, but regular agricultural uses, including market gardening, would be possible. So I guess the only way that I could see quote unquote ensuring that the 10 acre or the 6 acres, sorry, be continued to be used for either conventional agriculture or more of a market gardening use would be through a required rezoning condition, which would then also require the applicant to go through the rezoning process on their own, whereby if there was not that condition, then the 10-acre parcel would automatically be rezoned to AG4, which is our agricultural small holding zone, which does allow for the uses that they're currently proposing. But it does not restrict buildings or other sort of recreational uses that council may be concerned about with the 10 acres in size. So I guess long story short, it's I guess possible that if it's council's wish to include a condition that 6 of the acres be rezoned to only allow for market gardening and agricultural use, that staff would work with the applicant to fulfill that condition, but it would mean that the applicant would need to go through a public rezoning process to change that.
Well, the reason why I ask, I mean, it's no different than when we're putting conditions on planned subdivisions and that type of stuff. I know when it goes to county council, that county council has a lot of farmers on there and they want to protect their farmland. And I believe Mr. Deal when he says that he wants to utilize this 6 acres for agricultural. If we can guarantee that, whether it's a condition or a signed document or a zoning change, if we can guarantee that when it goes to county council, then they may be more, lenient on their decision that the fact that that 6 acres will stay as agricultural.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, other than I guess the proposed rezoning, which I'm going to be honest, as staff, I've not seen something like that for a surplus farmhouse consent, but it's definitely something that could be explored as to what some options there are. I guess we just get down to as for the applicant, sort of what their timelines and such are looking like. And then B, if we go the agreement route and such, we just need to work with the CAO and staff and such to ensure that whatever agreement would be in place would be something that is A, appropriate, and B, I guess, defensible, because it then would probably likely turn into an enforcement issue if part of those 6 acres were not being used as outlined. So I think it may be a tricky solution to try and find a way to restrict that 6 acres, but staff would definitely be willing to look into that further if that's the wish of
Okay,
council.
Thank you.
It is an interesting concept, Councillor Chartrand. I hope it doesn't become a can of worms, that's all.
Yeah.
I would like a few minutes just to speak to it in general, if I can.
Sure, go ahead, Cody.
So I'm just gonna run through a few of the policies here, just kind of briefly, as quick as I can. Start with Provincial Policy Statement 2020. Sorry, just hold on a sec here. Not a public speaker either. So in the preamble of the policy, it does state in general, enhancing quality of life for all Ontarians, supporting principle or supports principle of strong communities. Plans shall provide clear, reasonable, and attainable policies. Part 3, how to read. Decision makers are to consider all relevant policies and to understand how they work together. No implied priority in which the policies appear. Policies provide flexibility and implementation, and no policies are always going to be applicable to every site. If we go down to page 26, in the agriculture section, section 2.3.1, prime agriculture areas and areas where prime agriculture lands predominate, specialty crop areas shall be given the highest priority protection, followed by class 1, 2, 3, yada, yada, yada. Also in 2.3.1, sorry, 2.3.3.2, in prime agriculture areas, all types, sizes, and intensities of agriculture uses in normal farm practices shall be promoted and protected. 2.3.4, law creation and law adjustments. Agriculture related uses, provided that any new lot will be permitted to the minimum size needed to accommodate the use and the appropriate sewage and water services. If you go over to the zoning bylaws, section 3.1, lot size agricultural severance. Where a new agriculture lot is created by a severance and conforms with the official plan and has a minimum lot area between 18 and 38 hectares, the said lot is deemed to comply with the minimal lot area provisions of the bylaw, section 4. Section 4 is AG1. This provision pertains to both the severed and retained lot areas. If we go to AG4, AG4 clearly states in the bylaws that the minimum lot area is 4,000 square meters, or 1 acre roughly, up to a maximum of 4 hectares. So basically just under 10. For all intents and purposes, 10 acres, it's 9 point something. So my application 100% falls within the bylaws as well. If you go on to the Huron County official plan, it also goes through stating visions of agriculture, healthy agriculture, and rural economy in Huron County is dependent upon activities which support agriculture, food production, in prime agriculture areas, farming, agriculture uses, related uses, farm diversified uses will be promoted, protected, and given over other land uses. And it also states, sorry, trying to run through this as quick as possible. So to the planning group's main concern, where it doesn't conform to the lot size, by definition, AG1, the 18 to 38 acres can only apply to AG1. It can't apply to AG4, as the bylaw clearly states that AG4's maximum lot size is 4 hectares. Would the plan group agree with that?
Are you referring to the members of council at this time, Cody?
Sorry, once again, I'm fairly new to this, so I'm not sure the proper lingo and who I'm supposed to address it to.
Like, and I understand that when and I'm gonna consider myself still a lay person, when a lay person goes through it, there can be things that look promising, whether they're right, wrong, or indifferent. That's quite often why it's recommended that if there is a planning opinion that does not go along the path that you would like it to, that each applicant always has the opportunity to have an independent planner where they can discuss things that they are trying to accomplish, and are there rules or regulations that would help them get to that point. Councils themselves, whether it be county council or the Huron East Council, are not expected to be experts in the rules and regulations of the planning acts. We do from time to time take on the responsibility of rewriting official plans, whether it be at the county level or at the Huron East level, but we rely on the professional planners to interpret all the rules encompassing any application that comes forward. And I'm going to tell you right now that county council planning department works towards trying to find how to make things happen if there's anything close to what they believe is a workable solution and stick within the rules. They're not in the habit of, we just don't like it, so we're going to turn it down. I don't know if you find that statement comforting or not, but I'm going to tell you that the opinion of the majority of all people, and certainly I'm going to say businesses over the course of the last few years, have noticed such a dramatic change in the fact that the planning department works towards trying to find ways to make things work for people. They're not just acting as a police state that says, no, it doesn't meet it, so too bad. But as far as asking my counsel to comment on the actual individual provincial legislation, we're not up to that task at this point. Sorry.
Okay, my apologies. No, I just wanted to just state a few things that I felt were relevant to support my
Yeah, no, and I understand that. I do. Okay. So we've had some interesting suggestions. We're still at a little bit of a dilemma, but at the end of the day, it's going to go to county council, and county council will hear all the information that was presented to this council, and then they'll also have their own discussion. So this council can make whatever decision it wants at this point, and let's move on. Councillor Chartrand.
So in order for this to go to county council, just so I understand it, then this council would have to vote against Jen's recommendation?
No, my understanding is whether we vote in favor or not, the applicant can still ask that it be presented to county council, and the applicant also has the opportunity to voice their desires to county council directly also.
But if our council supports the 10 acres, doesn't that, or would that have a minor effect on county council that we've really thought about it and our Huron East Council supports it?
Okay, so I'm going to say traditionally that with a lot of planning things that go through, when the local municipality is in favor of it, that usually gives a lot of credence to what county council will do. I'm also going to give that a caveat in the fact that I've certainly seen a fair number of applications that were larger sized parcels of farmland being taken out of production, and county council was still in favor with the lower tier of going ahead with the severance, but will still quite often reduce the size of that severance. And the argument that quite often comes into play is that the intent of the official plan for the province, the county, and most lower tiers, if not all, is that to keep as much agricultural land in full agricultural production is quite often the argument that comes back.
Well, that being said, then I would like to, or put a motion forward that we support the applicant's request of 10 acres.
Okay, so moved by Councillor Chartrand. Councillor Steffler, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I will certainly second that motion.
Okay.
Growing vegetables to me is agricultural. So.
Yeah, not gonna argue that point.
So, like, I agree with Mr. Neal, like, he's not taking any farmland out of production.
Yeah.
So I agree with the 10 acres, and I also request a recorded vote.
Okay.
Sorry, are you ready for that recorded vote now?
Yes, Jessica, you have the motion that I made?
Yes, that the severed parcel be at the rate that the 10 acres as requested as by the applicant.
I do have to ask Jen if there was any final comment from the planning department that you wanted to make or suggest before we go to the vote. Okay, thank you.
There are the usual preamble or the other conditions as in severances, and I'm assuming that will be part of this motion as well. So I can read those out. It's the general conditions as part of a severance application. So right now I have the vote as moved by Councillor Chartrand and seconded by Councillor Steffler.
Just 1 second, please, Jessica. Jen had her hand up. I don't know if she had a additional comment.
Yeah, sorry. So as far as the recommendation is for approval with the inclusion of the conditions, but if you just remove I want to say it's condition number 8 with the size, then that would be satisfactory, I feel, as to what council is asking for.
Jen,
And I can also share my screen with those conditions as well, if that would be helpful.
would it be appropriate though to it's actually I, and that the severed parcel be reduced to a rectangle with a maximum area of 10 acres?
Well, no, because the applicant has already requested, like the application is for the 10 acres. So we generally don't have a condition in there to restrict the size. It would just be that the severed parcel, once they do the survey and the draft plan, we confirm that it is the 10 acres that was applied for. So you can just take that condition out completely, if that's the wish of council.
Okay, I need to ask the mover and the seconder if that's their desire. They're the ones making the motion.
So you're taking the condition out of 3.5
The
acres?
size. Yeah.
And leaving it at 10?
Correct.
I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Yep, I'm okay.
Okay. Go ahead then, Jessica.
Okay, so the recommendation was moved by Councillor Chartrand and seconded by Councillor Steffler that the Council of the Municipality of Huron East acknowledge the report of Huron County Planner Jennifer Burns dated April 27th, 2022, and has no objection to severance application C12 2022 Cody Deal for concession 5 part lots 13 and 14 Gray Ward, provided the following conditions are met. A, that the conditions imposed be met within 2 years of the date of notice of decision as required by section 5341 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990 as amended. B, that all municipal requirements, financial or otherwise, be met to the satisfaction of the municipality. C, that the sum of $750 be paid to the municipality in lieu of parkland. D, that the subject parcel be numbered and addressed for 911 purposes to the satisfaction of the municipality. E, that section 65 of the Drainage Act be addressed to the satisfaction of the municipality. F, that a survey showing the lot lines of the severed parcel easement and the location of any buildings thereon and a reference plan based on the approved survey be provided to the satisfaction of the municipality. G, that where a violation of any municipal zoning bylaw is evident, the appropriate minor variance or rezoning be obtained to the satisfaction of the municipality. H, that the applicant provide a letter from a licensed contractor advising that the tank on the separate parcel has been pumped and is functioning properly to the satisfaction of the municipality. And I, that the retained parcel be registered in the name of Evergreen Holsteins Limited. I will start with Councillor Stepler, who did request the recorded vote.
Yes.
Yay, sorry, yeah, yay is in favor of how it was read and nay is opposed. And Councillor Stepler, you had said
Yay.
yay. Councillor Morrison,
Yay.
Councillor McGrath, sorry, Councillor McGrath.
Yay.
That was a yes.
That's a yes for me.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Chartrand,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Fisher,
Yes.
Councillor On,
Yes.
Councillor McClellan,
Yay.
Mayor McClellan,
No.
Councillor Dalton,
No.
Councillor Deal. Oh, sorry, she's in conflict, so she will not be in this vote. And Councillor Wilby.
I guess no.
So that was 3 opposed and 7 in favor with 1 in conflict. So that is carried.
You didn't ask Alvin McCullen.
Yes, I did. Yeah.
No, you didn't.
He answered.
Yeah.
I didn't hear him.
Yeah, he did.
He was right after Councillor On and just before Mayor McClellan. I think maybe I said their names too close together and maybe they might have blended.
So what did Alvin vote?
He voted in favor.
Okay.
Did you have another comment, Councillor McClellan?
Yes, I did. Through you to Jen. Jen, just an observation. At our last meeting when this was presented, it sounded like the applicant was taken off guard by the size of it. I think he came to the program thinking it was 10 acres and you were presenting 3.5 acres. How could that happen?
It didn't.
Yeah, it did.
Oh, okay, there is an explanation.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. So the applicant was still requesting the 10 acres, and that was the application that they've applied for. Staff let the applicant know that we would not be in a position to support the 10 acres and would be recommending a smaller size. At that point, it's up to council as to, you know, how they wish to vote on the size. The recommendation of staff was 3.5 acres, which the applicant was not in favor of and did not want to see. I guess also in talking to the applicant after the discussion, definitely understood their concern perhaps and did apologize for not being as clear as what the staff recommendation exactly would be. In general, when we're not in a position to support an application, we always do let the applicant know that. And then as far as what the staff recommendation is, that's often published in the agenda on the Friday before council. But in this case, also because we were so off as to what staff's recommendation was and what the applicant was looking for, I left it to council really to make a decision and provide comment back. So that was just staff's recommendation. That was not the applicant's request. And yeah, I hope that helps to.
Well, no, and I certainly understand that, but it just seemed like when you presented it, he said himself, it was all new to him. So I just wondered if there was a disconnect or what happened there. That's all. That's what it appeared like to me. So.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question. I guess I would just clarify that, you know, it was his request was still the request that he was still was making. In review of that request, staff were not in a position to support it, and the 3.5 was just the the number that we thought would be reasonable. So yeah, I don't have much further to add.
Jen, if I could just clarify something that might make it easier. My understanding is that there was actual documentation that was sent back to the applicant that stated that it would be at that your recommendation was going to be 3.5. Now, there's no way to confirm whether the applicant ever had time to read it or anything else, but my understanding was there was actual email sent back that did state that fact. Is that correct or not?
Through you, so there was correspondence that was sent to the applicant to advise that staff would not be in a position to support the application, and that the recommendation would be for a reduced, the recommendation would be for approval with a reduced lot size. That lot size was not put as a firm number, as it is a staff recommendation, and we knew that we were so far off, but in reflection, I guess, of that process, definitely have taken some notes to ensure to be more clear, I guess, other than just sort of that general feedback to the applicant. So there was lots of conversation that the application could not be supported as applied for. The applicant really wanted the 10 acres. Staff's recommendation was the 3.5. That 3.5 was perhaps not as clear to the applicant in advance of council, but the applicant was clear that staff would not be in a position to support and would be recommending a smaller lot size.
Okay, all right, thank you. Councillor Chartrand?
Yeah, just so I'm clear through you, Mayor, to Jessica, of the 10 people that could vote on my motion, what was the final number?
So the final number was 7 were in favor, 3 were opposed, and 1 was in conflict. And so your motion did carry.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we are, Jen, thank you very much. I think we are done with the planning portion at this time. We are down to council reports. So council member reports, and the first one, county council report, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I have county as well. I have another report, and I wasn't able to find out who instigated the barbecue on Main Street on Saturday, but whoever it was, we'd like to thank them very, very much. They raised $1,900 for the splash pad selling hot dogs through free will donation. So it's great to see the community jumping up, jumping in, whatever, to support the splash pad. County Council had a very, very interesting report from a group whose name I have forgotten, from Bruce County, on the production of hydrogen as a fuel going forward to produce green ammonia, which will be used to produce green fertilizer and reduce our dependence upon Russian fertilizer and fertilizer made from natural gas, etc., going forward. So if you go to the county website and see the last week's meeting, again, it was very, very impressive what can be done. And they're going to use excess electricity that is generated at night and not needed, so they won't be selling it at a loss to the states or shutting turbines off, etc. So very interesting. And I don't have anything on Charger Crew yet. I don't know if Mr. Mills had a call from them or not. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that update. Are there any other boards, committees, meetings, or seminars that members of council would like to report on at this time? And sorry, Councillor Deal, I forgot to ask to have you brought back on after you had shut it off. That was not intentional.
Not a problem.
Okay. Are there any requests by members at this point? Councillor McClellan.
Just, I don't know if this fits in here or not, but in here in East, we don't allow ATVs on highways, right?
Councillor McClellan, I can't answer that question because I go back and forth with this so many between here in East and county council and every different municipality because it all passes through the county. I don't even know where here in East stands with it.
Yeah, well, I heard it on the radio there this past week, and there was a discussion on the radio about that, and I think it said here in East does not. But I guess my point is, I know they're a valuable tool for farming. It's just I wish maybe through the administration or CEO, if you could talk to the OPP, because around here they drive them without helmets on, especially Friday and Saturdays in Ethel. I get complaint after complaint about that. So maybe if the OPP could just make an extra cruise through, would maybe help as well. So thank you.
Okay. Councillor Chartrand.
Yes, I investigated this with my neighbor when Brad Knight was still here. And my understanding is that our bylaws allow ATVs in Huron East as long as they're A, insured, and B, licensed, and must be worn helmets at all times. That's my understanding, and I guess Brad, our new Brad, can verify that, but that's my understanding. The same thing goes with snowmobiles. They're allowed on the roads as long as they're licensed, insured, and helmets.
Okay, all right, thank you. Councillor Wilby.
That was brought up at the CHIP meeting on Wednesday, and farmers are exempt. We can use our ATVs to go from field to field. We're not exempt from helmets, but we are exempt from using the highways. Also, they're looking into making a map, and I contacted Jessica Rudy about it to see where here in East they are allowed to go if you're not a farmer. Like say, for instance, that you just can't roll into town and go to the grocery store with an ATV, that type of thing. And this map is being created by the MTO and the OPP and CHIP to say where the routes are or if they exist. So that's what I found out at that meeting. And then I'm not sure if Jessica wants to say what she sent in, because they wanted a response.
Yes, through you, Mayor, I did send our current bylaw to them, which kind of outlines everything. I'm just trying to find it here as well. But I also did make a note that the ATV is off-road vehicles is also part of our kind of enforcement bylaw review that we're doing currently. This was actually one of the first ones I have on my list to review and bring up to speed. The current one's from 2010, so it does need a lot of revision. I did find one group that does have trailways listed. I didn't see it going through Huron East specifically when we're looking at specific ATV routes, but I did say I would do a little bit more looking into this. The current bylaw does give some definitions of where we can go and not go, but I am hoping to kind of refine that further and make it a little bit more defined with the review that I'm currently doing. But yeah, at this point, I'm still looking at exactly which roadways and things they're allowed to go on for Gloria's request that she had submitted. I'm sorry, Councillor Wilby's request that she had submitted.
Okay. Okay, no, I appreciate that. Did you just have a quick follow-up then, Gloria?
I do. I know the G2G trail does not allow the ATVs, does allow snowmobiles, but not ATVs.
Okay. All right, thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mentioned this to Mr. McRoberts yesterday when I got a call from a constituent concerned about break and enters, vehicle stuff stolen out of vehicles, crimes of opportunity. He wondered if Seaforth could establish a, I forget what it was called, Brad. A citizen
Neighborhood watch.
neighborhood watch. Thank you.
Yep.
I think we had one years ago, but I think it was when we had our own police force. But I'm not 100%.
There is a neighborhood watch association that if they wish to do so, I can send you the link, Deputy Mayor, that you can forward on to that person.
Okay.
It's not something that necessarily the municipality gets involved. It is there is some coordination, or I guess with the OPP. So I guess I could probably check before I sent that to you to see whether our local OPP supports Neighborhood Watch. But yeah, the Neighborhood Watch Association works in conjunction with the local police in terms of setting up that service. But it's pretty much a volunteer organization. It's not a patrol. It's not a confrontation type organization. It's just simply watching. And if they see unusual activity.
Okay, that comes back now. This constituent was more interested in some form of patrol.
Okay, yeah. And a neighborhood watch, yeah. I just reading what I read with it, I think a lot of the neighborhood watch sort of suggested that patrol not be part of it because it gets you to that confrontation and starts putting you at jeopardy and risk.
That would be my concern, but this constituent was pretty adamant about having something. So should I refer him to the OPP or see if the neighborhood watch will massage him?
I think probably start with the OPP and let them have conversations with him first.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Chartrand.
Yes, two things. First of all, to follow up, if we're reviewing to Jessica and to Brad, if we're reviewing this thing with ATVs and snowmobiles, we need to be very, very clear, because my understanding right now is in Huron East, these ATVs are allowed on all of our public roads as we speak right now, as long as they're insured and licensed. And I've seen OPP right on my street, in front of my house, pull ATV over, asking the person for the insurance slip and making sure that it is licensed. So this map that you're trying to draw, I don't know, like it needs to be clear. Either they're allowed on our streets or they're not. Because right now, they go by my place. I see them out every day on the public roads in Huron East. My second point is on the neighborhood watch. I was involved in a meeting 2 years ago in Van Astra where we had OPP officers at our meeting because Van Astra wanted to implement neighborhood watch. And it was suggested at that time by the OPP not to have patrols, but if volunteers wanted to put a sign in their window of neighborhood watch, it was more for people, could be adults or kids. If they were in trouble, if they saw that sign in a window, they could go to that house for security. But the OPP definitely recommended that we not do our own patrols for safety reasons.
Okay. I guess if there's any concern about where we stand with ATVs, if it's already something that the staff are working on, then I would not ask for a report. If it's since we already have a policy, whether it's right, wrong, or not, it would not be a burden for just staff to include the current policy in our next package just for council to read. If council wants to have a discussion at that point, they can. But if staff are already working on something going forward, at least by us having it available to us, we can read it. And if we get questions from the public, at least we can answer based on what the current status is.
I just want to make sure it's clear and that if it's not allowed on our roads, then there's a question of enforcement.
Okay. All right. Yep. Not a problem. Okay. So that was under request by members. I am down to notice of motions, and I'm wondering if Councillor On has one.
Sure, I'd like to make a notice of motion that I will be bringing to the next meeting about the fire chiefs meeting biannually or whatever the best recommendation would be, and bringing back a report to council for that. And I also, a totally different vein, and I don't know if this is the right spot to do it. Here in Kinloss recently started a pilot project with golf carts in their town. And I was wondering if I could ask for some sort of report to be brought back to us. I know in Brussels, there are already a lot of golf carts that run around, and it might be something to look into in the future.
Councillor Chartrand.
We looked into this in great detail in Seaforth because when the bridges project, the golf course bridges project came into place, they had submitted some proposals to council in my first term. Zoe wouldn't have been on then. And the OPP got involved in it. And the fact that the golf carts didn't have braking systems like cars or turn signals and that type of features, the OPP were 100% against allowing golf carts on our city streets.
So how did here in Kinloss get around that then?
I have no idea.
I'm going to comment, Zoe, in the fact that when this happened, I'm going to say Jan, Brad, and myself, we tried a lot of different avenues. And although the bottom line is the OPP were only following provincial rules, the provincial rules did not allow it. I'm going to say our biggest mistake was we actually asked for permission instead of asking for forgiveness. And I cannot state one way or the other whether anything has changed at the province or whether that's just the direction that other areas might have taken. But we thought we were doing the right thing because we were trying to include the entire Bridges area, because that was part of the original sales pitch for those homes, was that they could bring their golf carts up down to pick up their groceries and everything else. So we tried everything we could possibly think of at the time, but bottom line is they weren't going to rewrite the rules of the province for us. And if we had never asked for permission and just turned a blind eye when people did it, it might never have been an issue. But because we opened up the can of worms trying to do the right thing, we knew that we could not just turn a blind eye after the fact. So, go ahead.
So can I still ask for whatever here in Kinloss has started in their pilot project to be brought before us just to have a look at? Or could Brad have a look at it and bring us back whether they have figured out how to get around it? I just want to look into it. That's all.
Sure. Yeah. Never
Certainly,
heard. Go ahead.
I can get information with Huron Kinloss. I know the CAO there, so we can find exactly what kind of a process that was.
Awesome.
Okay. All right. So the only other thing, Councillor Ron, is either contact the CAO or Jessica just to get your wording right for your motion for the next meeting.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Steffler, you had a comment?
No, I agree with what Brad's doing. Like you can buy signal lights and all that for golf carts. So you can buy all that stuff, seat belts, signal lights, tail lights, headlights, and everything. So I think there's maybe a bit of a difference here.
Yeah, the final stumbling block that we could not overcome when we tried to get it was that licensed vehicles in the province have dual braking systems.
That's right.
Like your car, if you broke brake lines to the back, you would still have brake lines to your front wheels for a while until the brake fluid had all leaked out. But golf carts did not have the dual braking system. Yeah, we had looked into everything else, and Councillor Steffler is correct. You can go ahead and buy it, but nobody was going to get into modifying the actual design of the original golf cart to put different braking systems on it. So that, at least back then, that was the stumbling block. So, Okay, I am down to information items. Mr. CAO, is there anything that we need to be aware of? You're muted.
Town of Empire support for humanitarian efforts in Ukraine. So they just passed a resolution there, fairly specific to their municipality. So I'm not sure whether what council wants to receive that or I don't think they're asking for support. They're just simply just receive it for information. And then the other piece is just your councilor expenses.
Okay. Jessica, is it appropriate just to say that I get one motion to receive all that for information?
You don't even need a motion because it's just for information anyway. So you can have one if you really want to have a motion, but it's not necessary.
Nope, that's okay. All right, thank you. 17.1 council format return to in-person. This is the second meeting of the month, which is when we were always going to discuss this. And I didn't know if there was any direction from staff at this time, or is this just a discussion of council?
I can certainly provide some updates. I mean, and I think I've shared it, I think, with council. So from the office perspective, staff aren't required to wear a mask. Certainly if they choose to do so, they can and absolutely are welcome to do so. I think, and what I've understand is that most of some of the health concerns of that sixth wave have passed and gone. So again, it's council's decision whether we go back to an in-person format or not, and I'll leave it at that.
Any comments from council at this time? Councilor On.
I sort of like the hybrid idea in terms of doing one Zoom and one in-person meeting a month, because I do know that doing Zoom does have a cost saving associated with it. But I also know that not meeting in person and meeting over the computer is not the same, especially with delegations and that kind of stuff. So I don't know if there is any way that we could always try and have our delegations at our in-person meetings and do it that way. I think that would be a good sort of compromise and hybrid of the way that we do our business.
I do like that comment. I'm going to go to the CAO before I go to Councillor Chartrand. And just before you respond, Brad, is there one meeting out of the two a month that we normally deal with the planning issues, or do we bring planning to everything?
Well, that's what I wanted to comment. When we did meet sort of with that hybrid format back last fall, we tried that approach, and we honestly, I'll be honest, we struggled trying to make sure that planning applications always came on that second meeting. Delegation requests, that's tough because, parties don't necessarily know our format. Certainly, I guess we could try to go that format for a little period to see whether or not a hybrid would work, and work with the planning department and try to get sense out there for people, for delegations to be aware of. But again, just like tonight, if there's a report on the agenda for whatever purpose and someone wants to be a delegation to that report, it's hard to kind of jockey. But delegations work fine in a virtual format as well. It's maybe just not as ideal.
Councillor Chartrand.
Yes, just for some information, as you're aware, I sit on the Asabo Conservation Board of Directors, and they continue to have a hybrid system where we can go in person if we want to their conference room, or we can still have our meeting by Zoom. We've held numerous hearings with the public on their disputes to our decisions, all on hybrid, or some have gone to the conference room. So I'm sure there's a balance that we could maybe have to continue both.
CAO?
I'm not sure how the Conservation Authority set up. I think the only challenge would be is that unless you're all just sitting with your computers in the council chambers and someone sitting at home, facilitating that, I guess, would be the challenge. It'd still be essentially a virtual meeting. public, if they came into the council chambers, they would only see the council members that are sitting there. It's difficult for us to have the agenda as well as their virtual council members on the screen. I just don't think we're set up for that kind of mixed format.
My personal position is I'd like to see us back in-person meetings.
Just to comment, I know with AMO, it's a little different, Mr. CAO, than what you just described. All the members that are in the room are just in the room, and then they have one large screen that is divided up for all of the people that are phoning in remotely. And they had this before Zoom and COVID were even around. Their system works well. I know the county has been for 6 months trying to come up with a hybrid system. And in fact, we were supposed to meet the first meeting in May with this new system, and they did some tests on it and they were not satisfied with it. And so the meeting ended up having to be completely virtual. I don't know if we're to the point where it's ready to work next week or not. I don't know if the deputy mayor knows anything different in the moment, but the whole hybrid system maybe works well if you've got the right technology, but county council was trying to be cheap and we didn't want to spend the money it was going to take to do what AMO did. So I think we need to decide one of two things. We're either going to pick all of our meetings that we show up back in the council chambers, or if we go along with Councillor On's comment, and I do agree, it's going to save the municipality money if we do maybe every other meeting as a Zoom meeting. And either way, I would still ask that if there's not a detriment to it, that when you have specific committee meetings and things like that, that if we can do them as Zoom and save costs to the taxpayer, if we're not hurting our ability to actually perform the jobs, then let's see if we can do some of those things. But if you want the physical council meetings back, whether you do one or two of those a month, I really don't have any problem either way. Councillor Stefan.
I think I'm the closest to town hall, and I would like to see one meeting a month, Zoom, and one meeting in person.
Republican nominee for governor of Pennsylvania, somebody who has been one of the most full-throated supporters of Donald Trump's lies about the 2020.
I don't know who's got the TV on the go, but we're listening to somebody's newscast there. But anyways, okay. So this is council's opportunity. So does somebody want to make a motion of going one way or the other? Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Council meetings in person and committee meetings at the choice of the committee, whether they want to Zoom or be live. I would prefer to have both council meetings live. Thank you.
Okay, I really, I'm kind of getting a split opinion here. Councillor On, go ahead. You raised it.
What is the cost saving for doing a Zoom meeting? Brad?
Oh, well, it's mileage, and I guess that would depend upon where everybody's coming from. So I don't have a figure on the top of my head, but that's what you're saving as a mileage.
Because I thought at one point it was about $25,000 annual or $25,000 annually.
Well, it won't be that much.
No.
That would probably not only include the mileage, but the cost of the meeting pay itself, but councillors still get paid for the meetings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There was a number somewhere that I do remember.
I don't think it's that high, Councillor On, but certainly there'd be some savings. I could, I think I won't be able to get you a number off the top of my head right now, but
it's only mileage.
Hey Ray, can you put your mute on?
It's not on?
No. Sure isn't.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Steffler.
Matters not what the savings are. A savings is a savings, whether it's $1 or 10,000. So if we save 10,000, that's good.
Okay, we do need to move this forward. So did you want to put a motion on the floor, Joe, and then we can either just vote yes or no?
Certainly, I'll put a motion on the floor that we have one virtual and one in-person meeting per month.
Okay, Brenda, you had not had a chance to speak. I have two questions. One, are you willing to second it just for discussion? And then two, do you want to speak right after that, or did you only want to speak?
I don't think I'm muted, am I?
Not now.
Okay, no, I can second the motion, but considering the way the internet works, I would like to see at least going back to the town hall for meetings. It's kind of hit and miss sometime. I agree with the fact we're saving money with the mileage, but it is nice to meet in person.
Okay, not a problem. Councillor Chartrand?
I thought the deputy mayor put a motion on the floor before the second
That
motion.
was just my
was put.
comments, Councillor Chartrand. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And if in fact this one fails and we want to go back to full, again, I have no problem with that. But I am going to suggest that council at least still in the fall review before the winter season approaches, because I still think there was a big benefit to councillors from the north that have to drive almost a half hour sometimes through a snowstorm to get down to town hall. And if there's no need to risk those people on the road, then why do it? And if there is a need to meet in person, then we can. But let's just follow this through at the moment. So I have a mover and a seconder. And at the moment, the suggestion is to have one meeting a month that is in person and one meeting that is virtual. So all those in favor of the motion as it's presented. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that motion carries. So at the moment, we will move forward with one meeting virtual, one meeting in person. I don't have a recommendation, Mr. CAO, of which one makes more sense to do which way. And I'd like to leave that to staff at the moment. And please notify us in lots of time before the next meeting.
Yeah, that's best. And just a comment to council that it won't come in effect until the first meeting in July. We've got to give about a month planning time there so that any planning applications that have given notices out there, that will go through the queue of those. So staff will make a decision whether it's the first or second meeting. We'll let council know and then we'll go forward, but that'll be effective as of the July meetings.
Okay. Occasionally in the summer, we only have one meeting. I would recommend that if we're only going to have one meeting in any particular month, and sometimes we do that in August for sure because of AMO, that we try and do that one in person.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Exactly.
All right. We are past our information items. Okay, so we've got our motion passed there, and we are down to number 18. Can I get a mover and a seconder to introduce the bylaws, please? Moved by Deputy Mayor, second by Councillor Morrison. That be it hereby resolved that leave be given to introduce bylaws 35, 36, and 37 for 2022. Bylaw 35 of 2022, a bylaw to delegate authority to the Chief Administrative Officer for executing gift agreements for the Brussels Morris and Gray Community Center renovation fundraising campaign. Bylaw 36, a bylaw to authorize the signing of the recreation program agreement between the municipality of Huron East and the County of Huron. Bylaw 37, confirm council proceedings. All those in favor? And motion carries. A mover and a seconder for bylaw 35. Councillor Chartrand and Councillor Dalton. That be it hereby resolved that bylaw 35, a bylaw to delegate authority to the Chief Administrative Officer for executing gift agreements for the Brussels Morris and Gray Community Center renovation fundraising campaign, be given first, second, third, and final reading, signed by the mayor and the clerk, and the seal of the corporation be affixed thereto. All those in favor? And motion carries. Thank you. Mover and a seconder for bylaw 36. Councillor McClellan and Councillor Deal. That be it hereby resolved that bylaw 36, a bylaw to authorize the signing of a recreation program agreement between the municipality of Huron East and the county of Huron be given first, second, third, and final readings, signed by the mayor and the clerk, and the seal of the corporation be affixed thereto. All those in favor? And motion carries. Thank you. And bylaw 37. Councillor Steffler and Councillor or Deputy Mayor, that be it hereby resolved that bylaw 37, a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council be given first, second, third, and final readings, signed by the mayor and the clerk, and the seal of the corporation be affixed thereto. All those in favor? Motion carries. And a motion to adjourn, please. Moved by Councillor Deal, second by Councillor Dalton, that the time now being 10:01 p.m., that the meeting do now adjourn until June 7th, 2022 at 7 p.m. All those in favor? Motion carries.